Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And we got a lot to talk about today. For those of you who may not have engaged with social media or seen anything on television for the last week or so, let me tell you what happened. So the Wagner group led a rebellion against the Putin regime. They drove a convoy, took over a city and a military base, the Rozov, I believe, area, I think it was. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Rostov.
And they
Rostov-na-Don.
Rostov, sorry. And they got to within an hour of Moscow. But yeah, then they suddenly stopped and called it off. So we're going to be talking about what that means. Is this the first crack in Putin's regime? Is this the beginning of the end for Russia? Or is this simply a demonstration that even a rebellion against Putin is doomed to fail, and his actually showing strength and strong determination by the Russian people to continue the war in Ukraine? We're going to discuss that. We're going to find out. We have some wonderful guests with us today, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Say, if you're following this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, be great. If you're on Kick or Twitch, sub to my channel, follow if you haven't, and thank you. And with that, let's get started. And first and foremost, Aircraft Sparky, hello.
Well, you mentioned good guest, great guest. I am neither. Hi, I'm Aircraft Sparky. I'm a constitutional populist conservative. I talk about things going on in politics and things going on in culture. And yeah, generally just kind of a jerk, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Dylan, hello.
Hello, my name is Dylan Burns. I am a amateur, I guess you could say, prospective war journalist covering the war on the ground, freelancing in Ukraine. And I also do streams basically every weekday from 6 p.m. EST to midnight. Talk foreign policy.
Thank you for being here, and I'm curious to hear your views on this situation. Next up, non-smoker, hello.
Howdy, non-smoker, Twitch streamer, communist.
Okay, well, great. Sock that left, hello.
Hey, SDL, semi-Twitch streamer, socialist.
Fair enough. Stardust.
Hey, liberal, semi-politics, semi-drama, weird internet stuff streamer. I do a lot of Ukraine coverage when there are updates and things like that. So, thank you. And I'm live every day.
Well, thanks for being here. Next and last, but certainly not least, Anna, please.
Hello, my name is Anastasia. I'm from Ukraine, Kharkiv. I'm a volunteer in Ukraine. And yeah, if you want to see my stuff, the only place I exist online is Ukrainian Nana on Twitter. That's about it. So yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Okay, and I guess we'll start with the first question. The Wagner Rebellion. Is this the beginning of the end for Russia? Why or why not? What do you think?
Could I go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah, sure. So what I would like to say is, I do think that this is embarrassing for Putin. Although it didn't go the way for the Wagner group as they expected, right? Prigozhin is somebody that Putin trusted a whole lot, to the point where Putin would eat food that Prigozhin cooked. That's how much he trusted him. So it looks like Prigozhin really started this because he didn't like Shoigu. He didn't like the other one.
Gerasimov.
Gerasimov.
Yeah, Gerasimov.
Yeah, Gerasimov.
Yeah, and he didn't like those two. He wanted to kind of get them out. That, I guess. So he started his march with that in mind. And I think he underestimated what Putin's loyalties. Putin, he thought maybe would back him up, and it turned out that this was not the case. Putin ended up not backing him up, ended up this ended up being like pretty big miscalculation from Prigozhin. So finally, he gets to I believe he gets to Moscow at some point, right? And before anything happens, it's like, okay, this is it. This is the last part. I guess Putin's not going to do anything here. So then he goes through with negotiations. He has to, because otherwise, it's a full on coup that he's doing, and he's not prepared for that. He was never prepared for that, right? He just wanted Shoigu and Gerasimov out. So I don't know how Putin is going to continue with Prigozhin being alive, to be honest with you. But Prigozhin's going to Belarus. They said that the charges were dropped, but now we're finding out that that is not the case. He's being investigated. I just think that this is embarrassing for Putin and a terrible miscalculation for Prigozhin, which may cost him very dearly.
So again, like, what does this signal though going forward when it comes to Russia? Like,
definitely big cracks. Definitely big cracks.
Okay.
In Putin's regime.
Fair enough.
Makes him look weak.
Go ahead, Anna.
So I would say that saying that this is like this was a coup against Putin, exactly Putin's regime, so to speak, is a bit of a claim that I don't really agree with much, because in my opinion he was mostly challenging the Ministry of Defense and Shoigu and Gerasimov. Not only because they are the people who Russian military has the most, let's say, not just Wagner, by the way, like a whole lot of Russian military has a lot of, let's say, bad feelings about, considering their incompetence and complete failures. But to be honest, it also has to do with Russian population. For Prigozhin, the popularity he grown and let's say respect he grew amongst Russian population is quite important, and as a figure. And he basically does not want to challenge Putin in meaningful way, because it's much easier to challenge Shoigu and Gerasimov, who Russian people also criticize and kind of despise at this point, which is you can't say that about Putin right now. Sure, some people are not very happy about what's been going on, but you can't say that whole of Russia just thinks Putin sucks at this point, which is not true, obviously. Right? So yeah, I would say he mostly challenged Ministry of the Defense, in my opinion, and also I kind of there are a bunch of theories what is going on. In my honest opinion is that you can't tell 100% right now what actually happened and in which way. To be honest, bold claims can be made, predictions can be made, but it's all it is. It's speculation at this point. In my personal opinion, the most theory that seems most, makes sense to me, at least, is the thing that Prigozhin was highly unsatisfied with the current situation. He's been talking about it for months now, and Wagner as well, obviously. And for him, I don't think it was as much as literally he wanted to take Moscow. I highly doubt that that was the goal, to be quite honest. But to place his demands and to get what he wanted at the end, which many Ukrainians and Russians, by the way, think was to get out of Ukraine overall,
So do you
which
think
kind
this
of
was?
happened in a way
Yeah.
for now.
Do you think that this was just kind of like his retirement plan, so to speak, that he was going to try to get a cash
Maybe,
settlement
like
and
I
just
said, I'm not.
fuck off, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to make 100% claims here, to be honest with you. That's the first thing. And second thing, of course, those demands and Putin caving into those demands did make him look weak at the end of the day, which is the rare moment in history Russians and Ukrainians agree on something, which is the disappointment. not to say that the reasons for the disappointment are the same in Ukraine and your Russian. The reasons are different. Obviously, I can elaborate on that later on. But yeah, it seems like a big fail, and I never seen so much anti-Putin sentiment, to be quite honest, in Russia ever. So yeah, it is a big blow to the regime, and it might not collapse like people dream about this very second. Obviously not, but it is a significant blow, let's put it like that, to Putin's image as a strong leader, and Russians believe in the security and stability that he can provide, which is for them one of the most important qualities in a leader. So that's
Well, thank
that's
you.
that.
This is a very thorough kind of discussion, right, of what this means from the Russian kind of Ukrainian's perspective. I'm curious to non-smoker. Last time you were on here, you thought that Russians' victory was pretty much inevitable, right? That there was, is that a fair reading of your
Yeah.
view? Do you still feel that way after these events, or has this changed
I
your mind?
do. Yeah, no, I do.
Okay.
So I mean, the question is it the beginning of the end for Russia? And I don't think so, although I understand why you came up with that question, at least initially. Like, there was a moment when all of this was jumping off initially where I was like, and I think a lot of people were thinking, maybe it is, right? Like, maybe this is looking pretty fucking dire for Putin. You know, and I think, I don't know, I agree with Anna, like, the best you can do is make projections. Like, I don't have insider knowledge of the fucking Kremlin, and I don't know what's being discussed at these meetings. I know Prigozhin met with Putin days before this even happened. Who knows what was spoken of at that meeting definitively, or who knew what, or whatever. But I don't think, based on the end result, the objective end result, that the coup or the March of Justice or PSYOP or whatever you consider it, based on the fact that it's over with now, I don't see how it could be the anywhere near the end for Russia. I think it is the end of Putin, and definitely the end of Wagner, based on Putin's speech earlier. They're basically gonna, you know, essentially liquidate Wagner, more or less. They're gonna either make most of the soldiers within Wagner either join the Russian military formally or basically quit and go back home. Prigozhin, who is someone who I thought, ever since that video in May, which I'm sure a lot of us on the panel know, I don't know if everyone in the audience gets the reference, but the video in May of Prigozhin talking in the field in front of all the dead Wagner soldiers, ever since he called out Shoigu and Gerasimov in that video, my thought was that he had political aspirations. Now those are done with. Like, I don't see how you could possibly expect to, like, climb the military bureaucracy in Russia or the, you know, whatever, into the government in some way. Like, his popular support, which was huge after Bakhmut, is significantly curtailed. So I don't think it's anywhere near the end for Russia, but I definitely think it's over for Prigozhin and Wagner. In terms of the war, I don't see much in terms of the dynamics on the battlefield, how this really changes anything, other than a lot more soldiers now being within 100 kilometers of Kyiv, because now they're in Belarus. So, I mean,
On our boats.
it you know, remains to be seen, I guess, right? I know that, you know, the Ukrainian counteroffensive was on pause right before this, and then I guess briefly resumed within an hour, coincidentally, of Lukashenko talking to Prigozhin and calling the whole thing off, which is a little sketchy. This whole thing is very fucking weird. So I don't know. There's a lot.
What are you? What are you implying here?
Well, okay, because I want to shy away from making
Just say
any
it with
like
your
outright
chest.
statements. No. I just want to make it clear that I
We
think
know.
no. Look, a clear argument can be made, to me anyway, that makes sense, that there was inside knowledge within the Russian government that this was going to happen. There were people who knew this was going to happen, and that permitted it to happen. Why? I don't know. What the objective is, I don't know. But you can't deny the fact that this turned out, you know, at least from a military strategy standpoint, pretty well for the Russians, because now they have all of these forces within 100 kilometers of Kyiv. And you might say, well, they could have done that anyway, right? But
Yes.
they kind of came up with this, you know, mysterious sort of cloak as to why they were doing this huge troop movement. Rather than have anybody, you know, catch on to it. It looked like it may have been a coup, and in actuality, they were just repositioning all these forces. So, I don't know. I don't think it changed anything on the battlefield. If anything, it might have helped Russia.
Okay. Well, any responses to that, gang?
Well, I think it would
Yeah.
it'd be cool if I could just, like, I have a lot of different things to
Sure,
say,
sure.
and I don't want to just spend all my time responding to one person. And plus, it's one person versus like probably 4 or 5, so I don't want to like pile on or anything. So I think this is a lot of Putin's own making. Putin, for a very long time, he's not the only dictator to do this. For a very long time, he has relied on pitting different factions within the Russian government against each other. He's not the first dictator to think of this idea. And for a lot of people, or at least a lot of Russian analysts, Prigozhin has been seen as a counterbalance to the MOD since Russia's at war, and they're putting a lot of money into the the Russian military. There's a lot of Russian analysts who believe that Prigozhin has been allowed to say the things he said, which is, 𝕾𝖎𝖎 and 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 and all these fools are mismanaging the war. We're losing 1,000 people a day. They might be able to go all the way to Crimea, because he wants to make sure that everybody is at least politically isolated enough or unable to rise to be a contender with him. This isn't the first time he's done this before. Russia analysts spend all the time trying to analyze the little itty bitty parts of this, so I won't spend too much time on that. But I think that this is a situation that got out of control, where he let Wagner get too bloated, get too powerful, get too independent. And once they realized their mistake and they started to try to reel Wagner back in with new MOD contracts, Prigozhin, not wanting his organization taken away with him, not knowing about his own safety, decided, you know what, I'm going to make a quick blitzkrieg towards Moscow, not to depose Putin. Not that I don't think if he was in the position he would do it. I think the dude is, he used to be a mugger on the street, then a hot dog salesman, and now he's a warlord. I don't think he is the person to never ever betray Putin. He challenged Putin's authority directly by doing this, because Putin told him to stop, and he said, I disagree with you, Mr. President, and then he kept marching on Moscow. But I don't think the intention of this was to overthrow the Russian government. But what surprised me about this was just how the Russian government seemed completely unprepared for what was going on. They didn't seem to have any reserves to respond. They didn't seem to have a rear to send their way. They had to pull Kadyrov's boys out of Mariupol to try to stop them at Rostov, and was still unable to take Rostov. It seemed like the TikTok soldiers still have yet to engage in much open combat, the Chechens. And as they marched on Moscow, they resorted to digging holes in the ground. And as they started to bomb the Wagnerites on their march to Moscow, those planes started to get shot down. From Russian sources, and the government has already kind of admitted to this, Prigozhin has admitted to this, multiple helicopters and aircraft were shot down, killing multiple Russian airmen. We know that some Wagnerites died as well. Prigozhin says this whole thing came from a missile strike on them. We don't know if that's true. The whole thing is a mess, and the Russian government seemed completely unprepared to deal with it. But then when Prigozhin got to the moment of truth, he probably looked at the writing on the wall, said, look, I needed people to join with my rebellion. Not as many people joined with my rebellion, and he tried to get the best deal possible. Now, Non-Smoker said that Wagner is being dissolved. I don't know if that's the case, because from the Putin speech that I watched, he said that either the Wagner boys could join the MOD, they could go home, or they could go to Belarus, where Lukashenko's going. And now we're getting reports that Wagner bases are being built in Belarus. And Prigozhin now releases an audio message saying that the deal that was negotiated with Lukashenko is that he continues to operate out of Belarus. And this all comes after Vladimir Putin made a speech live on TV saying, I will bring these coup people, these traitors to justice. The FSB is putting out 12 to 20-year arrest warrants for Prigozhin. He's saying he's going to annihilate the opposition. Then he makes a deal with them, and then he lets them get off. And then calls the people who marched on Moscow patriots, right? He looks weak. This is the weakest Putin has ever looked. Now, the question on whether it's going to have an immediate effect on the battlefield, I don't know. I do think this is going to solidify Western aid to Ukraine. This is going to send a message to American leadership, to German leadership, to French leadership, that the political pressure, the economic pressure, and the military pressure is working. This is not going to have a good impact morale-wise on the Russian soldier. Imagine if you're a Russian airman right now, and you just found out that 20 of your colleagues got shot out of the sky by a bunch of rapists and criminals that your government armed after they turned their guns on their own government. And now none of those people are going to be held accountable. And you just say, government basically said, fuck you to the Russian Air Force. What does that say to the average Russian pilot? What does that say to the amount of respect the government has for the people that Wagner killed? What are their families going to think? What are the families of Russian airmen going to think? There's so many elements of this that have yet to be discussed. For example, what if another security crisis happens? Maybe not within Russia, but within Kazakhstan, which has had a lot of unrest in the last 3 years. What if, for example, Azerbaijan gets into a conflict with Armenia, an open, hot conflict, because that's something that's still bubbling? What if there's a security crisis elsewhere? What if there's a revolt in Belarus? There's a lot more discontent in Belarus than there is in Russia. These are security crises that I'm not sure that the Russian government can deal with if they can't even stop a gang of hoodlums hoodlum mercenaries from marching on their own capital. The reaction I've seen on social media from Russians does not seem to be positive in reaction to Putin's speech. Some of them are saying he's flip-flopping and whether he's going to punish the people who killed the Russian Air Force. Others are saying that his response is too weak, because if he says, I'm going to punish everybody involved, and then he lets them all get off scot-free and continue their operations, possibly maybe in Mali, I've heard some reports about that, maybe in the Central African Republic, where they're going to get mine and mineral rights, and Prigozhin's going to be able to sit pretty for the rest of his life. That's not going to be a good stabilizing force for another group of mercenaries or another group of soldiers who might turn their own guns on the government in the future. I think the government was unprepared for this situation, and they didn't really realize how hollow a lot of their power was.
Okay, that brings up several points to talk about. And one being, is the aid to Ukraine that is being given by NATO and its allies working? And even if it is working, is it something that we should continue to do? Sparky, what do you think?
So when it comes to aid and stuff like this, I have been vehemently against the U.S. providing aid to Ukraine, not because I'm pro-Russia by any point whatsoever. It's just more along the lines of, we've put our nose in everyone else's war. This is not a North American war. This is a European war, and the Europeans themselves are not putting forward enough of the aid for us to justify. Of course, I was thinking when all this was kicking off, okay, well, I think I know where the $6.2 billion went. But then I looked over at the guy over here. Oh no, it's over here. It's one of his videos. And it just seems like, no, it's an accounting error because they're double dipping. They're charging you. They're going to end up charging Ukraine for replacement cost of things that we have sent over there, or things that we have promised to send over there. When I look at what was happening, going on, I didn't see it as a coup against Putin himself. I saw it as a spitting in the face of the MOD. Wagner feels like they have not been given enough ammunition, enough arms and everything. And I mean, that's fair. You're seeing a lot of complaints by Russian soldiers all over that they're ill-equipped. And to be fair, the Wagner group, they have a lot of ill-trained people, but they're mostly, well, like Dylan said, rapists, murderers, things like that. They're penal forces used as meat shields for the main fighting force. But a lot of people, a lot of fighters over in Ukraine are stating that the Wagner group is effective in what they're doing. They may not be a perfect fighting force or anything like that, but they are at least effective. What is going to happen to Wagner? I don't know. I actually think they're going to go back to Africa, where they have made their reputation. They didn't go with no 25,000, as was initially estimated in their march to justice, or whatever the hell they wanted to call it that second. The fact that they shot down Russian airmen who was trying to stop them, yeah, if they had the means to do it, and they felt they were being attacked, they defended themselves. Is that a good thing for Russia? Hell no. It looks bad on Putin. Putin is supposed to be coming up for election in 2024. Could this be the end of Putin if an election is to come up? We don't know. Putin could probably say, we're not going to do an election because we're in the middle of a war. There's a whole lot of we don't know, and to be fair, I don't know enough about Russian culture, language, and everything else to go as in depth as maybe Dylan, or especially Anna. They are there on the ground. They get to see a lot more. They understand a lot more about what's going on than most of us over here on the Western Hemisphere sees. So yeah.
All right. Non-smoker, what about you? Aid to Ukraine.
Oh, you know what I think.
Yeah, I do. I know.
I mean,
I'm just trying to get discussion going. I'm trying to do, because you guys are all monologuing. I want discussion,
right. Okay, let me
this.
Well, we were doing openings.
We're setting the money on fire.
No, we're in the discussion mode right now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so yeah, you can respond to what people are saying. Okay. But Anna and Stardust. So Anna and Stardust, then we'll have.
I just wanted to say about I might have forgot a lot of things. I'm not a professional, but one of the things that Spoker said that I think needs to be elaborated on. One of the main reasons I also, by the way, it hurts me to say, but I kind of agree with you that it's not the collapse of the Russian, everything like many people dream about. I mean, it would be nice for us, but it doesn't happen in anytime soon, I think. But to be honest, the reason why I think it has quite a strong impact is because of a Russian culture itself. So one of the main reasons, if you ask Russian people what is good about Putin, right? So they will say especially people who lived through the 90s will say oh, he provided stability, he stopped the gang violence, he stopped the opposing forces, killing each other and shooting people on the streets, and he did this and he did that. So for them, it was one of the main, and they will even say something, not always, but will say something like that. Fuck democracy, fuck freedom of speech, all of that. At least we have this stable, strong leader that will keep this chaos at bay. Which I don't, I'm not a fan of authoritarianism personally, but I can kind of sympathize, even despite my overwhelming hate for Russia, because that's one of the reasons they do like the guy still and hold him in high regard. Not all again, but a lot of people. So for them, this felt, as from what I heard from my relatives and I read on social media, even people who are vatniks or again kill those Ukrainians, even those people, they are still what the fuck? It feels like the 90s again. It feels like some kind of dude, armed militia, whatever the fuck, can march through entire country and threaten violence, shoot down 15, I presume so far, pilots and kill them. The car of civilians has been shot through. A couple civilians died in that car, Russian people, not by Wagner, by the way, by Russian military, but that's another story. So all of that just can happen and nothing would be done to the people who did it. So for many people, this has very much struck a blow against the image of Putin as this strong leader who can take care of his underlings, so to speak. So so in my personal opinion, that's pretty impactful, and we will see the result of that in Russian society, I believe, at least at some point.
Interesting. Okay. Stardust, you had something to say? And again, if you
Yeah.
guys want to interrupt at any point and actually have a back and forth, feel free, please.
Yeah, so I tend to agree
Interrupt.
with
Sorry. Continue.
Thank you. I tend to agree with
boy.
people's assessments here. I don't think this is necessarily the fall of Russia coming. I just think that it reveals some pretty big, weaknesses for Putin. And definitely, because Putin, he trusted Prigozhin so much, it is, it's a little bit embarrassing. I did want to ask Dylan. I know we're talking about what's happening next for Prigozhin. There is a Russian paper that said of this morning, Prigozhin remains under investigation for inciting an armed mutiny, despite Kremlin spokesman Peskov saying late on Saturday that the charges against him would be dropped. What do you think about that?
It feels a little bit like a flip-flop, and I understand why I can hypothesize why he did it. None of us, let me be clear about everything we're saying. I'm not Putin. Nobody in this room is Putin. We can't be like, this is what Putin's thinking. But
Thank fuck.
allowing a mercenary group to shoot down a bunch of your planes and aircraft, right? Take over your 11th largest city, Rostov, which is the size of Dallas, Texas, by the way, and a major transportation hub and supply hub for the occupation forces in Donetsk and Luhansk, and holds the Southern Military HQ, which is supposed to command all of occupied Ukraine. It's supposed to manage all of that. So a very important city that makes a march on Moscow, rejecting your authority along the way. If you let them all completely off the hook and you show no backbone, what is that going to say to his potential political rivals? What is this going to say to other figures? Because other figures have private military companies. Shoigu, it doesn't nearly have as powerful as a private military company as Wagner, but he has a private military company. They've been attacking Avdiivka. The head of the occupation authority in Crimea has a private military company. A lot of people have private military companies, or at least support with oligarchs so they could attempt to start thinking of, let's say, contingency plans or if something happens again like this, which if it happened once, it can happen again if Putin doesn't figure out how to, get the hatches down on his regime. This could mean something very dangerous for the Putin regime.
Yeah.
And so I think he's trying to reverse course a little bit to show that he has some backbone. But if he doesn't follow up by arresting Prigozhin, then like it doesn't matter if you say he's wanted if you don't arrest him.
Well, I see. That's the thing. I don't know that I truly believe that Prigozhin is going to get away with that the Wagner Group is going to be unscathed from this. I just don't see it. If it is the case that that Putin is continues to have Prigozhin under investigation, and we know Putin's history in the past and how vindictive he is and how spiteful he can be, I just don't see Prigozhin coming out of this. Really, and I could be wrong, but
Yeah,
I mean,
go on.
well, I guess for me, I think a lot of people assume that Putin has like a direct hold on maybe like every institution or like the FSB or the MOD or like very tightly. But for example, Belarus, that's where Lukashenko is hypothesized to be. Some people have even tried to find the exact hotel he is, the one that he's being like people are saying he might be at. By the way, has $50 a night rooms, so I would love to go interview him if he would have me.
Prigozhin, not Lukashenko, or
no, Prigozhin is in Belarus right now. At least that's the theory. People don't know for sure because he's like that's the idea because he made a deal with Lukashenko, went to Belarus.
Yeah.
Lukashenko, while his regime's strength and stability is directly tied to Putin, he also doesn't want to be completely controlled by Putin. It is known that in the past that Lukashenko played a weird balancing act between the West and Russia, trying to pit one against the other so he could get the best trade deals and the best stuff for his regime, for his government, and his supporters would of course say for his people, however you see it. He also does not want Belarus to be annexed by Russia, become one state, and he loses his position of authority, which is something that the Russian government and Putin specifically is who people talk about. That's something that he wants, and that is something that he wants to avoid, is losing a lot of the autonomy he has. And so some people are saying, okay, he's in Belarus now. If he has like 8,000 or 10,000 Wagner guys with him, who knows how many he's actually going to get over there. What is Lukashenko going to do? Is he going to arrest him? Is Putin going to send in an army to arrest him with all the Wagner guys that follow him to Belarus, who he said could go with him? So he flip-flops again? I really don't know if Prigozhin is going to make it through this or if Putin's going to keep to his deal. It's hard to say because here's another element that a lot of people that I didn't expect. The amount of support that Wagner got on the ground in Rostov was weird, where people, when the cops came back, they were booing the police officers. I saw one person waving a Wagner flag in the background. When Wagner was there, people were giving them flowers and food and drinks. And
now that's leaving, they were cheering for him and clapping, right?
But that's not a universal reaction. But a lot of people have family members who are in Wagner. A lot of people see Prigozhin as somebody who's criticizing Shoigu and criticizing Gerasimov, who haven't managed the war in the best way. And he's one of the few people that seem to be allowed to say that openly. During his march on Moscow, he was saying 1,000 Russians die every day. The MOD is lying to you. They're lying about how the war is being run. And that type of message is very charismatic, not because it's anti-war, as in we shouldn't be fighting the Ukrainians, but because it's where they suck at killing the Ukrainians. That's the message.
They're the reason we're losing, basically. He's like blaming the MOD for the Russian failures on the battlefield. And you're all, also the victory at Bakhmut did a lot to help Wagner's reputation, I think. Like that's one of the things that makes him so popular. And I think it makes it complicated for Putin to simply arrest or execute Prigozhin in that scenario, because he knows that there are a lot of Russians who do support him.
But the thing is that he's
actually true.
Sorry,
Jesus, what's going on?
I guess the thing is like Prigozhin, is saying this stuff like, oh, what they're telling you is untrue, and that in itself makes it an even bigger argument for me. Like I don't know how Putin is going to be able to handle that or withstand that, right?
Anna, sorry, I just wanted to address like what Stardust basically said. I know that many people are of the opinion that Prigozhin will do a little tumble from the window soon, which is known to happen with opponents of the Kremlin. But I personally, I might be wrong. If he dies next day, don't take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's not exactly in the cards right now. So there has to be some time that people will move on to something else, it's way too. I think Putin will give him even more power if he like martyrs the guy now. Because again,
That's
I
true.
don't know what
Yeah.
is going on this planet, but non-smoker is kind of correct because people do in fact support Prigozhin. Not all again, but his image, Putin himself allowed it to grow as a not a potential opponent, but at least a person with some kind of like sway towards the public.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the them being the only effective people in Russian army, and second of all, them of course speaking the truth. So basically, Prigozhin, if you notice, doing this like populist type of dance, which is
Mhm.
very rare for Russia. They rarely appeal. So Putin is Tsar, okay? So he's not the one of the people. He's not the yeah, I'm one of you guys. He never portrayed himself like that, and it's never been like it. But Prigozhin, he does, despite being a literal billionaire with the golden, golden, how do you call it, golden blocks in
Mhm.
Africa that slaves mine for him, but despite that, people in Russia see him as more one of us than anyone else. So this gives him also a bit of a popularity boost. And yeah, to be quite honest, again, hate to defend Russians, never do it, but this time around will, because many people presume that like half of Russia is fans of Wagner. And they use this as the, oh, look at them supporting rapists and killers. And it's a bit more complicated than that, because simply because I saw a bunch of videos, and I speak Russian, it's my language, so so Wagner was calling people there. So people who were like walking around and asking them, oh, you're like rock stars, touching Prigozhin's hand and all this cringe. They ask people who are their supporters to come there. They're like proof of that, videos of that. So not to say that people in Russia don't support Wagner, many do, but those like crazy fangirls and fanboys of Wagner were mostly people who are fanboys and fangirls of Wagner that they called. So I wouldn't call it a representative of like all Russians, to be honest with you, despite my deepest desire to shit on them at every opportunity. So
That-
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
That's true, and it also needs to be
Yeah.
evaluated that this is in Rostov. This is very close to the war. They're going to probably feel the effects of the war more than the average person in Moscow, the average person in St. Petersburg, and maybe them being a lot closer to where the war is actually being fought and where the war is being supplied from. They might be even more critical of how the government has handled the war, because they might be getting even more direct stories from the battlefield, from the front line of Russian soldiers coming back, talking about the dilapidated conditions many of them are facing.
This
Well,
also
actually
just
so
a little point.
there,
just real quick,
Uh-huh.
this really shocks me how I thought, and perhaps this was my mistake, right? But I thought that we would be a little more not bullish, but bearish on the Russian regime. Excuse the pun, right? Like as Dylan alluded to, if Prigozhin gets out of this with basically a cush job and a nice sweet deal, I don't see in a 5 to 10 year period how Putin survives that. I'm not talking it's going to collapse tomorrow, right?
okay.
But if you have a situation where people see you literally challenge Putin directly, and Anna said that he mostly challenged the MOD. That's true. But this was a direct contradiction. He crossed the Rubicon on this. He crossed a red line on this when it came to going against Putin. If he doesn't disappear or face severe repercussions, I don't see Putin lasting 5 to 10 years from now. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong here. I don't know.
So one thing I will say is that one thing people noticed, a lot of like people who are analyzing the situation noticed, is that after Bakhmut, Prigozhin's reputation was really good, but you would see on Telegram, like Kremlin affiliated stuff, trying to kind of make propaganda to bring his reputation down. So I don't think that, like, I don't know that I think like Prigozhin is going to die tomorrow, right? But I don't think that he will come out unscathed. I do think that they're probably going to work pretty hard at bringing his reputation down at the very least, before whatever else they decide to do. So
Yeah, a bit of like an insight, I guess, in Russian stuff is the strategy now, I presume, is what I know of Russian, Kremlin and how they work, is to swipe this under the rug. That's why he makes those ridiculous statements like, "Oh my lord, patriotism won. No blood was spilled. True dignity and patriotism. We are all one Russian people, and the only enemies are outside enemies." You know.
I wanna get a
So
space.
this is just so basically the reason they do that is because that's why I think that Prigozhin will not take a tumble out of the window just yet, but doesn't mean he will not, because I do think they trying to make it seem like it's all under control. It's 4D chess, whatever. It's everything is under control, which it clearly is not, and Russian people see that as well. They are a bit brain dead, but not so brain dead to miss this one. But yeah, overall, I think it will have repercussions for Putin 100% and for his regime. I also am kind of like afraid, not afraid, but I think there's an inner struggle between various fractions in Russia. So not just Shoigu and Wagner. There's also like Kadyrov people who hate Wagner. Wagner people hate Kadyrov people. There are like a bunch of different divisions who hate each other. There are also other people in Russia who can see Prigozhin's move and think, maybe we can pull this one off, So it's also, that is a risk as well, of course. And the fact that they did not actually punish so far, we don't know, but they may change their mind.
Yeah.
But so
I
far
personally
didn't
think- yeah.
punish. Yeah, may give others ideas. Let's put it like that. So
It
yeah, so
breeds
there's that as well.
discontent. I do want to give space to 𝕲 left, who has been very quiet up to now, and I'm curious his opinion on this.
I guess to speak a little bit to what you said, Anna, you talked about how the Russian people are brain dead, but they're, even they can see that this is a problem. And I don't think that's true. When we look at approval polling on Putin, Putin has like 80% approval polling. It's 6 months into a war that's killed 70,000 Russians for like virtually no territorial gain. If the Russian people are like secretly hating him, they don't say it to pollsters. I think that the rally around the flag effect, meaning, you get in a war, the leader gets more popular, like plus 20, plus 30%, it's boosting him up. This might drop him 10, 20, 30 points. He'd still have majority approval rating. He has a very strong, very long legacy of enormous media support and as a result, enormous popular support. Putin rigs elections, but he probably wins them fairly too, even if they were fair. So that's what propaganda does.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he will lose popularity to such degree that his regime will collapse. I pretty much have nothing to say. I think it's also be like 20%, 30%. So I'm not disagreeing with you. It might be a bit bigger blow, just knowing Russian culture and what they value. Let's put it like that right now in a leader. So like I said, I say that myself. I don't think that Putin's popularity is made up. Of course, the elections are not real in Russia, to be honest. But other than that, the people do in fact support Putin quite a lot. The majority at least does. It can change the balance, the scales a bit for sure, and it might have an impact. But I'm more concerned about an impact it will have on other actors, so to speak, that might want to, do chaotic stuff there right now.
Actually, to speak to that a little bit. So when Rome was falling, one of the big things that happened is people lost trust in the center. They didn't think that the army could come and protect them from a foreign invader. So what did they do? They built their own army. They literally, this was the rise of private mercenaries, private local armies, a local governor, a local aristocrat, whatever. So they would get their own military. Prigozhin has showed that you can force the Russian government to give you a hell of a lot of leverage if you've got 25,000 guys and some guns. So that probably changes how much you think you should kowtow to Putin. He can't fucking bargain, right? He doesn't have power. It's not as much.
I don't think the Wagner group. I think it's only the Wagner group that could have pulled this off, and he didn't even have 25,000 people, for Christ's sakes. Wagner has a very strong reputation. They have a very strong reputation amongst the Russian populace because of their actions in both Syria and in Africa, where they basically built their reputation. When you look at the criticisms of Shoigu and 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, I think I'm saying that right. I could be wrong. He's not wrong. They've been failures from the get-go. They came in under strength. They came in under trained. And what you say, little or no gain 𝕲 no, they have gained land. I mean, they're holding a quarter of Ukraine currently. So
yeah,
they
so
have gained land, and until you've actually done an invasion, my guy, you don't know how difficult it actually is. And the Ukrainian people are actually fighting back much harder than what they originally thought. So this is something that
sure, but this is a country that prided itself on having either the second
Yes,
or third
yeah.
strongest military in the world, right? Putin was the big, masculine, strong man, rides bareback on horses, and he's going to ride Ukraine bareback if he gets his army in there.
the
and he gets
Iraqi
fucking
army had the
blasted.
largest standing army in the world, and the United States rolled over them in 15 hours, man.
It took 26 days, but yeah, that's the point. We rolled Iraq in 26 days. Ukraine has been 15 Iraqs, give or take, right? Like that's an
They
embarrassment
don't
to
make
the
me do
world's
math.
The
second
Russians
largest
don't train. The Russians don't train the way the U.S. does. It's that Shoigu and Gerasimov are mismanaging the war from the Russian aspect. Prigozhin is actually saying things. So what will protect Prigozhin from Putin is the fact that he's not wrong. 70,000 Russians have died out of an invading force of what? They started out with 150, 180,000. Tremendously under
not so much.
strength.
It's Wagner. Wagner losses. He doesn't say 100,000, which is the real number. Yeah, just Wagner people, 50,000 died.
Oh,
by
okay.
short estimation. Yeah.
Well,
So
I
yeah, it's
believe-
not,
Okay, yeah.
the losses.
I think the-
what
I think
you
the
said like, is not
75,000
true.
I think the 75,000 death number comes from the leaked U.S. document, which I probably trust. Of Russian losses.
There's like in the leaked number, in the leaked documents, there was like basically 100 Ukraine, 100,000 something, and 200,000 Russia, which is close to our estimation as well. So no,
Well, it
it's
would
not
kind of make sense
70,000.
because it's usually a
Yeah.
3-to-1 death
Yeah,
rate
they're invading
for
on-
the
yeah,
invader
they're
versus
invading.
defender.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, the math actually does check out there, and this has been basically a scientific
But-
law of invasion.
But it's correct. Yeah, almost all our soldiers will say that. So all the soldiers I speak with personally say that, yeah, Russians suck, but the majority of losses any army that is doing the offensive will lose more soldiers than the
Mhm.
army that is doing the defensive. That is just the true of the war. So there's that. Not doesn't mean they don't suck, but still the fact. But overall, I disagree basically with what you say. It's a huge gain for Russia. Taking Bakhmut and I don't know, Dylan, help me out. How long it took? You're an expert on that shit.
It was about 9 months.
Yeah, it took a long
Yeah.
time to get there, but they
Se-
have
se-
gained land. To claim they haven't
they
claimed any
gained
is
a
weird.
city of 40,000 people that was flattened to dust. Yeah, great achievement. Also,
Yeah,
not
but-
only that, we took wait. We took Kharkivska Oblast back, which is by the way, where I live. Kharkivska Oblast back, Sumy, Chernihiv, Kiev, Kherson was liberated. We'll liberate 50% now of what they took after 2022
Mhm.
invasion, part of the invasion, right? So it's not good, and even Russians know it. So yeah, they are like, we were promised to take Kiev in 3 days, in 3 weeks, in months. Okay, where is
Yeah.
Kiev? What's up? What's going on? So even Russians are thinking like, what up? Why our greatest army on earth riding on bears have not, raped and killed everyone and took Kiev and shit? What's going on? And they're not very happy about it. And I can understand that. If you've been told for your entire existence since you've been born that you're the strongest army on earth that can roll anyone over and turn California to dust in couple seconds, which is, what they say on their TV, then yeah, you would ask questions like what is going on. And Prigozhin, by the way, is not dumb. He plays up on those things. He talks about things that in a very careful way, not to challenge Putin directly. He says oh, the Tsar is being fooled. The generals are fooling the Russian people and Putin, our great leader. But overall, he's not dumb. He does say bits of truth there, just bits, but
Mhm.
they are already intriguing in a society that is
Okay.
full of propaganda and bullshit.
There's a few people who
that's-
wanted to get in here, and I frankly lost the order, but I think it was Dylan and non-smoker.
So I think something I think I said this before, but I want to reemphasize it. When it comes to the damage this does to Putin's image and how people view his unshakable hold on the country, his power, which he's held on to very strongly for well over a decade, something like around 20 years now, there's no going back on this. We were using the analogy of crossing the Rubicon. The Rubicon cannot be uncrossed. I mean, Wagner did it. They did uncross the Rubicon, but the damage done by crossing it and then not having a strong, immediate crackdown on them, that can't be undone. Because the message that sends to everybody else in the Russian elite is, Prigozhin just challenged Putin, and he's not dead. Openly challenged Putin, shoot down his planes. Putin said to stop marching on Moscow. He kept marching on Moscow, and only when he got a deal that was sufficient for his personal interest. Which, the more details we get, the more Wagner gets, the more Prigozhin gets, the worse it is for Putin. If we find out in the next few days that 𝕾𝖎𝖏 and 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 get fired because of the fallout of this, no matter the intention of that, that's going to have massive damage to the regime. We don't know if that's going to happen, but my main point is the other elites, the oligarchs, people in the MOD, the soft and hard, Siloviki, everyone is going to start making contingency plans. Everyone is going to be prepared or going to try to prepare for another instance like this happening, because now there is a scenario that people are thinking of all across Russia right now of what if this happens again and they don't stop when they head towards Moscow.
The unthinkable is now thinkable. The
It's
unthinkable is
thinkable.
now
Yeah.
like, okay, well,
Absolutely.
maybe we should actually discuss this.
And the second one, there's one last thing I want to say, because we talked about not having an impact on the front. These divisions have been having an impact on the front since basically the start of the war. There's a lot of Russian volunteers, people who deliver aid to Russian soldiers on the front line, or just Russian soldiers themselves, who talk about communication breakdowns between Wagner and the VDV and other private military companies, other volunteer corps, Rusich, and all these other groups. If they're not communicating with each other, how are they going to protect each other's flanks? They all blame each other for the different failures of the military. They all have leadership squabbles and political squabbles on top of that, where they want the people to their right possibly to fail so they look better. That was a lot of the politics around Bakhmut, where Prigozhin was accusing the Russian MOD of cutting their ammo supplies so they would fail when taking Bakhmut, so he would humiliate himself in front of Putin, and then the Russian MOD could maybe centralize control over Wagner, as Prigozhin was railing the MOD of being a failure. Those divisions are not going away. In fact, this very well could intensify those divisions, make it harder for your army to effectively communicate, to effectively work together, and to stop them from killing each other, which also has happened in different locations across the battlefield, where different groups get angry, they start yelling at each other, somebody shoots another person, and up to this point, they've been able to put it down, where they court-martial someone and go send them to prison if they kill someone as part of a different PMC, a different unit. But now, I mean, I don't know if there's any coming back from that. So I don't think this means the immediate death of Putin or the immediate collapse of the regime, but this could be the cracks starting to show a light at the end of the tunnel, a way out of the Putin-dominated political hierarchy.
Go ahead, non-smoker.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to backpedal a little bit to something that was said earlier. I mean, like, I'm willing to acknowledge that the Russian military, the standard Russian military, however you want to phrase it, has underperformed, right, based on expectations prior to the war. I would actually kind of agree with that argument, and I think that that's what helped Prigozhin's status rise so much, especially following Bakhmut. But I don't like this argument or this insinuation that Bakhmut falling was like irrelevant. No, it's not like some major land grab, and no, I do actually think a lot of the Russian arguments about this is like the crucial key to the entire Ukrainian front collapsing. But it's a significant battle just in terms of losses incurred by Ukraine. I mean, this is per Gray Zone, the Telegram channel, but they positively identified 37 Ukrainian brigades at Bakhmut, 2 regiments, and 18 separate battalions. And if you go by Wagner's losses, which I think was like 25% of the men they had deployed there, if you use the same, let's just assume it's the same percentage applied to Ukraine, it's tens of thousands of Ukrainians dead. You know, like that was a significant battle because of the amount of losses incurred by Ukraine. And these are like important, I would argue like highly capable Ukrainian soldiers who matter a lot in terms of this planned counteroffensive, who were killed in this battle. And I think that's why it's significant. And all of the losses incurred by Russians were mostly these convicts, right? Now leaving, in the wake of that, now you have this. The thinking was after the fall of Bakhmut, now you have this entry point for the Russian conventional military, right? To then storm in and take all of Ukraine, right? Or win. And they hadn't done that. And, again, once
Yeah,
again, I think it's a fair argument to say they've consistently underperformed. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's a better statement of how a really amazing feat Wagner accomplished. Whatever you want to say about them personally, and whether they're good people, or, like, obviously, they do horrible things in the battlefield and terrible things off the battlefield, and they're all convicts, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, I mean, they're an incredibly effective unit. I mean, you can't deny that. And this was a significant victory.
There's two things I wanna say in response to this. The first thing I want to say is when it comes to Bakhmut, I think a lot of people assume that Ukraine took its best soldiers, put them all there, and all the people that were dying there are like foreign legionnaire Marines from overseas, or like their best fighters that have been fighting since 2014. The sad reality for both sides of Bakhmut is there was a lot of people who were sent into Bakhmut who are not the most experienced, who didn't really have the best idea of how to be an effective soldier in combat, who are fresh out of training on both sides, not just on the Russian side, but on the Ukrainian side as well. And this has been told to me by multiple soldiers who have fought at Bakhmut about their replacements coming in, and they don't really know what the fuck they're doing. And I'm not saying that they're completely unprepared, but maybe they fought on a different part of the front, or like up to this point they were doing checkpoint duty, and now their first battle is possibly one of the most intense, blood-filled battles
City
of the
fighting's
war.
a lot different than line fighting, but
Exactly, or checkpoint duty, or stuff like that. If you've been doing checkpoint duty in Lviv for the first 10 months of the war, or a year of the war, Bakhmut's going to be a very different experience for you. If you're doing patrols, it's very different. That's the first thing I want to say. So when we talk about, like, Ukraine lost all of these, like, highly trained forces, and Wagner were just throwing away prisoners, I don't think that's a fair characterization of what the balance of power was on the Bakhmut front. Also, while it is true that Wagner threw away a lot of penal colonists, a lot of people don't think that, like, Wagner is just a bunch of rapists and criminals. And I do emphasize the rapists and criminals because I think it's important to bring up the fact that they gave rapists machine guns and set them loose on the country they're supposedly liberating, right? I think that's important to emphasize. But a lot of the people in Wagner are people with experience from Syria, people in Syria, experience from the Central African Republic, people who have cut their teeth in the Russian imperial game for the last 10 years after serving in possibly, like, Russian special forces. These are very experienced people, and Wagner lost a lot of them as well. It's part of the reason why Prigozhin, a lot of people speculate, wants to make this tilt to Africa, because he doesn't want to cut Bakhmut's, Wagner's teeth again and again on Ukraine until the organization is a shell of its former self, or it's taken away from him. That's part of the reason he panicked so much when they took away the prisoner recruitment efforts that Wagner did it and gave it to the actual Russian MOD. That was part of the cornering of Wagner that happened. Also, I haven't seen any estimates of the Bakhmut battle that puts it that Ukraine lost more troops than the Russians. Different centers like estimate different, like, calculations of exactly how many troops were lost. But I don't know if 𝕾𝖍𝖎 would be the main source that I would use, but I'll just ignore that because I want to get to my second point here, is if it was such an accomplishment for Wagner to take Bakhmut in, say, 9-10 months, after, a city of, let's say, 70,000. I'll go further than Anna with the 40,000. 70,000 is like what it says on Google, right? So let's assume that it had all those people, which it didn't, and they're fighting for that city 9 months. How the hell are they going to take that same fighting force, move all the way to Kiev, and then march on it, a city of 3.5 million people that has been built up for a year and a half after the Kiev counteroffensive, with mines and traps and swampland created by locals leaving and beavers taking over, making it hard to move armor and tanks and machines into this area? How is, I want to hear from non-smoker, what's this grand chess move where Wagner is going to now march on Kiev?
But that's the thing. I actually said in my statement, I never bought into the narrative that this would open the floodgates and it meant that the war would end. I do.
You said it was a chess move that they were moving it over the Belarus.
No, I think it's a significant city that fell to the Russians, and I think denying that's
I'm talking. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking about the shift of all these people from Bakhmut, right? All these Wagner guys, they shifting them to Belarus because this is grand chess move. That's the shady stuff that's going on. How does it take them 9 months to take Bakhmut, a city of 70,000 people, if I'm being generous, but they're gonna take that same force and march on Kiev, a city of 3.5 million people? It's not even the same ballpark.
I don't think them being 100 kilometers outside of Kiev means that they're absolutely going to take Kiev and it's a foregone conclusion.
Well, no, they're not going to do shit. They're not going to march on Kiev. That's not going to happen.
Fucking question or not?
Okay, I'm just saying that your assertion is just impossible.
You don't even know what I'm asserting. I'm trying to reiterate what I asserted because you're challenging an assertion I didn't make. I'm saying that there are Russian forces, former Wagner forces now within 100 kilometers of Kiev. I'm not saying this is it. The war, they're going to fucking absolutely take the city. The war is about to end. Holy shit. I'm saying that's pretty fucking significant. Wouldn't you say that?
What does that imply,
No.
though?
Do you think it's not significant that tens
It's
of
not.
thousands of former Wagner soldiers who are, as you put it, or
No.
I guess as I put it, capable, right, to some extent, battle ready, battle tested, capable men.
If
who are
Putin wants to get them all
within,
killed,
100
maybe.
fucking kilometers of attacking Kiev.
To be clear, to be clear, Putin marched on Kiev with a 50-mile-long convoy, and he couldn't even get into the city. That's much larger. Wait, let me finish. That's much.
You didn't let me finish.
That's much larger. That's much larger. That's much larger than the force that is currently held and operated by Wagner. They march with a much larger force.
Ukrainian military focused on the counteroffensive?
The bulk of the Ukrainian military the first time was also focused in the east during the first offensive.
So you think it's more likely that the Ukrainian military can reorient their entire, a bulk of their forces to defend Kiev out of nowhere potentially and just crush Wagner and it won't matter whatsoever?
I don't even know if they would have to reorient those many forces.
No.
I'd love to hear your rationale for that.
Well, let's assume that Wagner's 25,000, which is the largest estimate you could probably make for Wagner, right? 2 brigades. That's, I think, probably what the Ukrainians would need.
You could be right. I could be wrong. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not a
25.
To say that it's not, to act like it's not significant.
By the way, can I also say, people like Wagner, when they talk about Bakhmut, they assume that they did all the fighting. But a lot of the other Russian PMCs or other groups you talk to, they'll hate when people say that because they know that Russian VDV were actively involved in urban fighting in Bakhmut. That other groups were involved in urban fighting in Bakhmut. They also had artillery that was essential for Wagner's capture of the city. And provided by other forces.
I understand that, but it was mostly Wagner. Everybody knows.
Okay, let's say it was mostly Wagner, but now they're going to march on Kiev without that support alone, or are they going to reorganize more Russian troops?
Presumably without that support.
Okay, so it's just impossible.
Again,
I don't know how they're going to do it.
I'm not suggesting Kiev is about to fall. What I'm saying is that
you said it was significant, and it's not.
I think it's very significant. If you told me the Russian military was within 100 fucking kilometers of New York City, I would be kind of concerned.
They've been within 100 kilometers of Kiev since the start of the war, except for that one point where they charged on it, and then they got pushed out.
Okay. I'm sorry. Why do we think that Wagner will return to Ukraine 100%? So maybe I'm wrong, but from what I have heard, that the Ministry of Defense, they will be kind of dissolved partially, and and for that they can no longer, by the way, recruit prisoners, which is a new thing that was just dropped, I think, yesterday or today.
Just real quick, to let people know, Putin gave a speech about 2 hours, an hour before we went live here, and he mentioned that those are the people who were involved in the Wagner Rebellion, coup, mutiny, whatever you want to call it. They can do one of two things. They can sign up with the MOD, right? Or they could just leave. They could go home, right? That's what was said. Whether that is true or not, I don't know.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that the ones who participated cannot. They only can go the fuck away. But the ones from Wagner who didn't participate, they can sign up.
Yeah, you're correct.
I might be wrong. But
I'd have to look at the transcript again, but I'll believe you.
So yeah, basically, just one thing. Basically, if they return to, there are talks, again, just talks, not a concrete fact, that they will return to probably Africa or something like that. Which poor Africans, they haven't raped them enough, I guess, or executed them with sledgehammers. But overall, there's quite a lot of talk that will actually be not as involved with Ukrainian war as they used to be, which is, if it's true, I don't know again, but if it is true, then it is a win for us because they are the most effective force in Russian army. So yeah, I don't know how the heck it's a win for Russia, to be quite honest.
Okay,
and then being New Kiev, I will not even address that.
Just real quick before, I know a lot of people want to go, but $10 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 of Predict says, how might Wanker Group react to Priggy being killed? Would they revolt violently again? The 8,000 of them reportedly
Mm.
stationed in Belarus would definitely do way more damage to Russia than Kiev. LOL.
I-
Yeah. So I look. I agree with Dylan that I don't think the Wagner group being near Kyiv is significant at all. I don't think so. But part of that is because the Kremlin did say that they are going to be dissolving the Wagner group. And yeah, we know that some of them are going to go to the MOD and then some of them are going to go elsewhere, right? But I
You said I could interrupt, right? You said I could interrupt if I wanted to.
Yeah, do you have something to
We
interrupt?
don't know that Wagner's being just because Putin says it's going to happen. It's no
Kremlin's-
longer. Wait,
okay.
the state of affairs is
100%, yeah.
the state of affairs has changed so much that just because Putin says something's going to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No.
They have the option to
He's
go to
not
Belarus
keeping
also.
his
So
word.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
if they have the option to go to Belarus, and that's
Yeah,
what Putin seems to have offered
right.
them, then Wagner's would probably still operate maybe in Africa, like in Central African Republic, Mali, maybe Sudan. You know, the Rapid Support Forces is
Yeah, but I think
is
it's going to be significantly. It's going to be significantly reduced, right? Like, so if
Possibly,
so many
yeah.
of their, yeah, no, I
Probably,
mean,
yeah.
I don't think if the Kremlin is saying like that they're going to absorb at least part of it, which is what it seems like it's indicating that they are going to at least absorb part of the Wagner group. I just don't see the I feel like I disagree with everybody on like Prigozhin and the Wagner group here, right? Because I feel like the Wagner group at the very least will be significantly reduced or significantly reduced in size. And I think
Potentially, yeah.
Prigozhin is going to face some sort of consequence. He's clearly still like as of this morning is still under investigation. So I just don't I don't agree with everybody here that Prigozhin is for sure going to have like a cushy job or are gonna go back to Africa. I'm not sure about that. I personally
I didn't
think
say
he's
that.
kind of in a sure, I'm not saying that you did, but I think I think that I think that he's kind of in a dangerous position right now. And I think part of that also is pointing to if the Wagner group is being significantly reduced again, they're not going to be going and marching on Kyiv unless they're just not. So
I do think that if there is a scenario where Putin's looking at the reaction, he's hearing like stuff from his intelligence agencies like, this guy says you a hoe, this guy says you a hoe, this guy says you're a hoe, and he's like, man, everybody's saying I'm a hoe now. I gotta go kill this Prigozhin guy, or maybe like the jig is up, like he's gonna try to stuff the toothpaste in. That's possible, but we just like all of this is still unknowns. One last thing, and I just thought of this. Let's say that this is a big like move to get all these troops over there. And it could possibly succeed. Why would Putin, right after seeing Prigozhin, use the glory of Bakhmut to try to rally the public around him on a beer hall push towards Moscow, then give him an assignment to take the Ukrainian capital, which would only glorify him and then empower him more?
I mean, that argument is built on the fact that Putin had some knowledge of what Prigozhin was going to do. Basically, this was something that they discussed days before it happened when they met.
I just don't know, like, if this move now is to move him to have this force near Kiev to possibly do this offensive, wouldn't an offensive on Kiev, if successful, then just make Prigozhin a more powerful political opponent for Putin, since he did what his government couldn't do for all these years? I mean, that's something that Prigozhin actually said in his
the Steel Man.
He said that on Telegram.
The Steel Man would be like a lot of accidents can happen, especially in a battle for Kiev, and friendly fire ain't so friendly when suddenly your position just goes boom. But
an
that
attack on
Steel Man,
Kiev
right?
would make no sense, though, especially with the.
Yeah, it's not happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no tactical sense. They don't have the manpower to do it. They have to from the Russian viewpoint. They consider it more important to hold Mariupol and Berdyansk.
Wow, everybody's General Patton in here. All right, listen.
No, because I can look at a fucking map and realize where the.
We'll see.
I
I think
mean,
it's significant.
Okay.
Dude, if they are suicidal,
But why
then
do you
maybe.
think it's significant?
But-
I mean,
Because,
like,
dude, it's thousands of fucking soldiers, repositioning themselves
Okay,
in
It
this
has no strategic value,
purely
my guy.
nonsensical quote unquote coup, right? It seems to me that, there's some credence to the possibility that maybe Putin had advanced knowledge of this, and maybe this is all a big game of fucking distraction to reorient some men into a more, advantageous position to attack Kiev if it
wouldn't
comes down
mean,
to
Why
that.
would you do a
this is
reorientation that puts the
It's
world's
embarrassing for him.
Yeah, go ahead, Sock done. Let's
Let's
hear
go,
from you.
finally. Yeah.
well, just why would you do a reorientation that puts the entire world's news media like looking directly at it?
Because they're going to see it anyway, dude. With satellite imagery, you're going to see
but then
thousands
it's not
of
a-
soldiers repositioning themselves. If you can reposition like thousands of men and have an excuse for it that makes it look like you're not doing that, it's probably a pretty good idea to distract
How-
everybody with a big
how-
social
But
media
they're not
campaign.
distracted. They're still looking at it either way.
No, but
right?
they're distracted as to the
A
reason
distraction
why.
is, hey, bird over there, and then I go the other way. If you're like, hey, bird over there, and
Dude,
then I'm
you're
still
missing the
standing
point.
there.
They're going
at
to
the end.
see the soldiers repositioning themselves regardless.
Yeah, but
Right?
that's
So if you can convince them of the reason why it's happening being other than what you actually want it to be or what your actual purpose is, then it's probably worth it to do some fake 24-hour social media coup that's, yes, a few people died, but was largely bloodless and involved very little resistance.
Didn't they down
They
like
lost
3 or 4
six
helicopters?
helicopters.
It was 13
Six.
people died.
Six helicopters, 1 plane, 15
That's-
pilots.
That's
Yeah,
it.
but
Okay.
compared
Putin
to
millions.
compared
You
to
think
what
Putin
it
would take
could
a
have been
PR
and
hit?
probably should have
What
been
does
if
it
it
mean?
was a
Nobody's
legitimate
attacking Kiev,
coup,
dude.
it
You
was
think
relatively
that-
bloodless.
I mean, I
You
look,
think
I
that
thought
Putin would
I didn't
take
think
a
Don Poker would
PR
actually make
hit
this argument.
January
this
6th is more
big?
violent.
Yeah.
You think that Putin would take a PR hit this big for this 5-year
Yeah,
chess
I didn't
move
Wait,
expect
say it again,
this
what?
argument either. I wanna get to the other questions we had, but I gotta explore
Let's
this.
Who wants
leave.
to tell that?
Yeah,
There's one I'm interested in.
yeah, I gotta explore this a little bit. Again, like I just so they move the Wagner group to Belarus. And what? Like, what then? What is next steps? It's not to take Kiev. That would be silly
Nothing.
unless, right? So they just sit there or what?
They have there is no reason to send them over there other than to say, hey, you're out of the fight for now. Get some R&R or fucking die. I don't know. Don't
Look,
care.
I know everybody here has planned a lot of like Zerg rushes on StarCraft or whatever, but I think you're overestimating your ability to manage a
Please
fucking
don't embarrass
battlefield.
yourself.
I've only fought in 3
thousands
wars,
of
my
fucking
guy.
soldiers potentially storming a city that might not be
8,000 is
completely
nothing.
defended. Well, 8,000 is nothing to you, maybe, dude. I know you probably have like a turret in your fucking bedroom or whatever, but for
No,
a
you
traditional
dipshit.
city, I mean, hey,
But I've
listen,
actually been to
everybody
war.
here, do you guys I don't know. One thing to consider with this coup narrative, and it was something I thought about with Dylan when he was saying how easily the Wagner soldiers went through, like even assuming, the narrative that this was a legitimate coup or uprising, march of justice,
narrative.
most IOP going on.
The
Part
narrative.
of the reason, what?
The
him go.
narrative. It's like, okay, just let him go.
Part of the reason that Wagner forces were able to so easily march through these cities is that, typically speaking, civilian cities aren't surrounded by fucking military, right? Now in Kiev, of course, they have military presence, right? There's a war going on, but it's not the bulk of the Ukrainian military. No. The bulk of the Ukrainian military is trying to desperately mount a counteroffensive right now, which is failing.
Desperately.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
really? How
desperate,
do
wouldn't you say?
My guy.
They aren't making a lot of
Yeah,
progress
yeah,
as far as
it's
I'm
not.
aware, right?
Are they really?
Yeah.
What's the
Not
progress?
only
Can you
that,
point it
they
out?
didn't even started. Yeah.
I'm saying
Anyhow.
I don't think they
Where's all
have
the
made a lot.
land, dude?
Guys, the only hope Russians have is to preserve what they already have. Nobody's fucking attacking Kiev. All of their efforts will be on preserving what they already
Yeah.
have, which
That-
will
Maybe
be
that's what
hard
they
for
want
us
to
to
do.
gain back. They will be hard for us to
Mhm.
gain because they have been spending so much time there, and they prepared not only just mines, but they're basically incredibly well prepared, and every soldier in Ukraine and commanders I talk with as well know that it will be much harder than it was, for example, Kharkiv Oblast and Kherson Oblast, which was sweeping, fucking taking everything they took for a week. We basically took everything they were trying to get for months. So yeah, but nobody's fucking attacking Kyiv unless they wanna be suicidal about it, which I approve of. It has my stamp of approval, but I don't think it will. Don't think it ridiculous to even think it will happen. Also, of course, it's for 4D chess argument. I expected that one.
Yeah,
You
that's
have
ridiculous.
more hope in Putin than Russians are do right now. I appreciate it. Russian vatniks are even desperate and disappointed, but you still find a way to
No,
somehow
it's
spread
weird
plans.
because if
Yeah.
I had so much faith in Putin and the Russian military, I would have probably see. I guess you could argue maybe this is like some sort of like I'm thinking Putin's some genius. What I'm actually arguing is that social media and information are powerful weapons in war. I mean, like if you ask any liberal about the Russian influence in American politics via social media, and they'll tell you that Putin is a genius and he is some mind control wizard and blah 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 blah. But when it comes to something like this, oh no, there's no way that they could have faked, some coup by having a practically bloodless march of soldiers through all these cities
Practically
where
bloodless.
pretty much
Social
nothing happened, and there was a bunch of pictures of people taking the Ministry of Defense building with their guns pointed but not fucking shooting. Nothing
the
really
social
came of
media
any of
wanna
this.
know why?
is so
Do you
This-
want to
from
know why?
war. It's so different from war strategy. Like you can't even just because
Stardust, how many
just-
wars have you planned?
I haven't planned any, but at least
Oh,
I'm
okay, I
not
just wanted to
pretending
clarify.
argument.
like you are.
This is a weak argument. None of us here are war planners. Do you
Yeah.
come from DOD? Are you part of
Actually,
ODNI?
how do you know I don't?
I
Okay,
I
work
don't.
for
there was a
the
How
friend
do you
in
know
here.
that I don't?
Okay.
Hello, fellow Langley
You know-
employee. I didn't know we were both doing coup planning. Like what?
Yes,
He
yes.
admitted it. He admitted it. I knew it.
But oh no.
No,
I know
I
who
do
your
work
dad
for the DOD.
Glowy
But
on
no,
glowy
it
action.
doesn't-
Let's go.
It doesn't make
Nick,
any
you surrounded
sense.
me with glowies.
The 4D chest argument makes absolutely no sense.
Hope.
Looking at the battle lines that have been going on, most of the action has been going on in the south because the Ukrainians on the counteroffensive is looking to push towards the Sea of Azov. They want to get in touch. They want to get a hold of Mariupol and I'm probably saying this wrong, Melitopol, but those are like the two.
Mariupol.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Melitopol, maybe.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but
Elon
those
Musk
are
said
those
that
are
too,
your
and he's been
true.
here for years.
Those are your true
okay.
like logistical strong points in the area and where the counteroffensive is happening. The probing attacks that have happened cost what was it? Three Leopard 2s out of the 6 that were given from Russia. That's a really bad showing there. I don't know about the entire battle reports that have been going on with that, but as far as the 4D chess argument, no, dude, that's bigger cope than QAnon. You should probably move away from that one.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. Well, as fun as this is to go over, we do have a couple more angles I want to talk about. And
Do we get closing statements or no?
on this one, if you'd like, sure. Go ahead.
So does anybody else want to go first, or I go first? Okay.
You're already done.
No, we're not done with the panel. I just have a couple more questions, and
But
we're gonna
Dylan's
move
making
on.
a closing statement.
He wants
Well,
to.
I
He
just-
wants to close out on this
statement?
topic, and that's fine.
This fragment.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
it was
I-
the whole conversation.
No. I just wanted to say one last thing on this, and that is what would get me about if this was all like a ploy, a psyop, is I don't understand why Putin would personally humiliate himself in the eyes of the Russian public to do it, and not do it through Shoigu or Gerasimov or through one of his other cronies, which has been the tradition of how they've run psyop operations to this point, like having somebody else be humiliated. Oh, it's their fault, it's not my fault. It's never Putin's fault.
But they
It's
aren't
always
they
that's always
more
been the rule of it.
humiliated than Putin is, though.
No,
Shoigu
they're
and
not.
Gerasimov.
If
They're
anything,
both
if
looked
anything,
at as
Wait,
being
but
primarily a
that
fault
doesn't-
of the
those
Russian
are
So
military.
really-
why would they have them both be humiliated? Then that's worse. Just if they have, because if the idea is, look, humiliate the Russian MOD, but we get this grand big ploy where we can move all these troops over here, shoot down a few planes, but you know what? We move the troops over there. I think it would still be stupid, but I mean, maybe it's possible. But when he also gets humiliated and we degrade his central authority as well, it makes no sense. Why would he make it so he's telling an army to stop and they literally just ignore
So,
him?
look, I actually believe in this notion that this is a psyop a little bit, but I also do believe that Prigozhin's animosity towards Gerasimov and Shoigu is real, right? And I think that his statements against them were, from the heart, so to speak, right? I think he actually was heavily critical of those two, and he's an opportunist ultimately. He has his reasons for that. I think in this theory where this was all planned out and orchestrated, I think Putin probably figured, or whoever really masterminded this thing probably figured, hey, there's already animosity here. There's already a lot of negative press against Shoigu and Gerasimov for the failures of the Russian military. We can kind of, more or less sacrifice these two.
And himself?
Well, I don't think.
Isn't
I
it
think
true
that
that
it's
Shoigu has
overstated a
more
little bit how bad
popularity
this
than
is for Putin.
Prigozhin?
I mean, if you look at the reaction online and from the public, I don't know, man.
Yeah, but that's online, dude, and online is all where you source it from, right? Like,
I mean,
I don't think
look,
there's any
if there's-
indication there's
there-
mass anger.
There
towards
is not.
Putin.
There cannot be no dictatorship is going to organize a coup against themselves, which does not end with them punishing the coup people and making the message clear that you do not try to overthrow us. You do not try to challenge our power. That's
But then why not kill
corrosive.
Prigozhin?
Because
Well,
he can't.
I would-
If he doesn't kill him, it's
I don't
because
know
he
if
can't.
I buy that. I just don't.
What I would say is I actually think Prigozhin's in a really hairy situation. We haven't seen the resignation of Shoigu or Gerasimov. We see Prigozhin kind of like exiled to Belarus, right? We see that the Wagner group at least partially is being absorbed. All of these things, and Putin in the Kremlin, kind of creating like anti-Prigozhin kind of like sentiment recently, it kind of indicates to me that Prigozhin's not in a great state. I don't know why they would rely on Prigozhin to go to Kyiv when they're already partially dissolving Wagner, and I don't know why they would take such a huge optical hit just to play this 5D chess move. It's stupid.
Any further
it's dumb.
Any other last thoughts on this before we move on to the election topic?
Just a few like things. I think maybe people just don't understand like Russians that much, but Americans, I presume, so it makes sense. But it's just that it is a huge blow to Putin in the long run. It's a first crack, like Dylan said. It's not like Putin is going to blow up any second now, but I never in my life saw so much discontent with Putin on media, from people, my relatives. They're people who I have like bajillion relatives in Russia. So one of them, their co-workers are talking about it. Everyone is talking about it, even if they don't say out loud. They are very much thinking that this is a blow to Putin for most and foremost. We will see what will happen with Shoigu and Gerasimov, if they will be like like fired or not. It's not like clear right now what will happen to them. But even that is caving in basically to Prigozhin and to his demands, and to basically like a terrorist demands. And yeah, sure, he maybe wielded out Potato King, to make it seem like he was not negotiating with terrorists, but it was like another party doing the trick, which I kind of skeptical about, to be honest, like how much Lukashenko actually did that. But at the end of the day, it is a huge fucking L. It's sad, pathetic, and very, very much will have its effect in the long run. I think mostly for Russian public, but also for Ukraine. We don't know about Wagner for sure, like I said, but if they will lower their participation at least somewhat in Ukrainian war, then it's a win for us. And yeah, all of it is a win for us, to be quite honest. So there's that.
In my last thought on this would be that in the 1980s, late 1980s, China was at a tipping point as well. There were mass student protests in Tiananmen Square, and for a while we didn't know what would happen. Right? We didn't know if this was the beginning of the end for the CCP, if that was the first crack in their authoritarian regime over there. They put it down hard. They made an example, and they killed a bunch of people. The Tiananmen Square massacre was a thing. And unfortunately it solidified their regime, and the CCP still exists today. So, without a crackdown like we saw there, I don't know if Putin can hold, but we'll see. Next topic that we want to talk about today is Zelensky recently has made a statement that they will be postponing elections coming up for president and other offices and things like that. Is this a proper thing? Should democracies withhold or postpone elections during times of crisis. Why or why not? What are we thinking? And we're gonna
Can I
start.
start?
Oh, if you want to start, we'll start. I was going to start with
Please.
Sockdun. I was going to start with Sockdun, but we can start with you, and then we'll
Oh, I
get
can.
Sockdun
I,
after.
you know, maybe like we are like opponents in that, I believe. But I just want to start, and I just think, you know, guys, I'm Ukrainian over here, right? So give me a chance. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous to even talk about it. Nobody in Ukraine even blinked a fucking eye, and you know why? Because 20% of our territory is occupied. They cannot vote. There's no way to organize vote for them. 8 million people left Ukraine, so abroad, you know, because of the war and the destruction of their homes made by Russians. 8 or 10 million people are internally displaced. So they moved from their, like, you know, houses, they're from east, south, and they live in other areas in Ukraine. So center, east, you know, Kiev, Poltava, whatever, you don't know, guys, but whatever, you know, like the west of Ukraine. So they all live there. So organizing just like on a like just practical scale, it's barely possible. That's one thing. Second thing, of course, is that the million people are actively on the front lines now, so cannot vote as well. You cannot like say, fuck front lines and wars, you know, like I'ma go vote, you know, not working like that as well. So this takes us to what? To like 15 million, 20 maybe even people that are very much cannot participate. That's one thing. And the second, the elephant in the fucking room. We're getting shelled every day. My friends are buying iodine, or how it's called in English, to not get radiation poisoning from Russian blowing up the 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 nuclear plant. They're, you know, trying to rebuild their destroyed houses. They're trying to get the pieces of their relatives that were blown up from the blown up places. You know, it's not the fucking time. We don't know if Russians will attack the voting points. They can. They've done worse things so far. So yeah, so obviously martial law is a thing. Even in United Kingdom, when World War II was happening, there was no elections, no voting, no anything, because they didn't have boots on the ground. The Germans were not in the United Kingdom occupying pieces of it, and you know there was no like so many refugees as well. They were just bombing them. There's, you know, which is enough obviously, but even that was a reason enough not to vote. So yeah, I'm thoroughly confused why it's a conversation.
Maybe
Renato,
Sockdun
please.
left can elucidate.
Look, I'm just a proud American patriot, and I think that our proud tradition of carrying on elections even during wartime should be a global democratic norm. During the American Civil
Have you
War,
been attacked?
well, yeah, during the American
Sorry.
Civil War, we actually did this exact same thing. We had not one, but like 6 elections because of how House elections happened at the time. We had elections for years and years and years during the American Civil War, and in part, it was it actually delivered a signal that Lincoln was handling the war really poorly, as an example. Now, just with getting a little bit into the details of it, the Lincoln was Republican. The Democrats did fairly well in the midterm elections because people were really pissed at how he was handling the war. In Ukraine, it seems like Zelensky would get enormously reelected, but that's not a foregone conclusion. Just because you're doing a war doesn't mean you're doing it well. Do you think that if Afghanistan was still holding on, like somehow that their leadership would have gotten great approval in a democratic poll there? I think that democracy is really fucking important, and we should never, like, it is one of the things that you should try and keep running as long as possible. It's one of the things which is central to any good society. I'm sorry that the UK is just too weak.
Can you address my points? How 20 million people
Well,
will vote?
I want to before we get into the open discussion for this, I want to hear everyone else's opinion. I understand. Just stand by. We'll get there. I promise you. I want to go to start. Well, man, this out of order thing really fucked me up. We'll go Sparky and then we'll just go in the order. Then
my bad.
No, it's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you. Sparky, what do you think? Elections? Yes? No? Maybe.
Yes, I believe that Zelensky should do everything that he can to uphold the faux idea of democracy in Ukraine.
Noted. Okay, short, sweet, to the point. Dylan, what do you think?
So, I mean, I'm more divided on it. On one hand, I know that if there's not an election, it's not like the people's will when it comes to who's running the country is not being heard. We all know that Zelensky would almost certainly be reelected. But putting that aside, I guess the only real change that could probably happen, maybe like on a local level, how like local like governments and regional governments could be operated maybe, But I do have extreme sympathy for the idea that there are millions of people outside of Ukraine right now, millions of people who have been displaced from their homes, a lot of people who are under occupation right now who you have no ability to reach whatsoever. And so holding elections when you can't have the full voice of your people participate in said elections is problematic. I do think that if they were to have an election, it could be a rallying point for Ukrainian society to point to their freedoms and their democracies, to say, look, this is what we do, even in the hardest of times. This is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for our democracy. But from my conversations with Ukrainians on the ground, most of them don't really seem to give much of a fuck, and they think they're fighting for that anyway. So I think maybe if that was to have an impact, it wouldn't be much on the ground. It would probably be more in the international community.
Non-smoker, and while you do your thing, I gotta do a thing real quick, so no slurs while I'm gone. But after non-smoker, if he's quick, Stardust, and then I should be back by then.
I will drop all the slurs.
Slurs. Yeah, I'll make it fast. Look, I actually don't think that really there's any point in having an election. To be honest, if I was from the Ukrainian perspective, because I think, as already mentioned, Zelensky would almost definitely win. And even if he didn't, the most important issue, political issue, the most important issue in general in the minds of every Ukrainian right now is the fucking war, right? And how they're going to win. And that requires, stable leadership. That requires someone who won't, kowtow to Russian demands and, will push as hard as they can for ensured victory. So they would either reelect Zelensky, definitely, or the only other votes cast, I would imagine, would be people who want to see, a stronger commitment, which I don't even know is possible. So I don't see the point. There is something kind of hilariously ironic about all of these people, including Dylan, no offense, man, but, who view this as like Ukraine is some sort of like budding democracy or whatever. And now we're urging them, no, don't hold elections, and there's like opposing political parties banned in that country and all that stuff. But granted, it's wartime. I do think it's an exception to the normal rules of how all this stuff goes. So I don't really see the point.
Yeah, I'm kind of like split on this as well. The patriot in me, the patriot in me, wants there to be an election and wants that, even if it's symbolic, this kind of like message that like, even through war, we uphold the tenets of democracy and
The
we hold our
Americanism.
elections, But at the same time, yeah, I know.
Let her have it, Anna.
But
I can't.
Our elections are meaningless.
But at the same time, I do understand like the perspective of people in Ukraine that again, yeah, there are a lot of people who are displaced, a lot of people who are out of the country, and with certain areas being occupied, it poses a really, really hard obstacle, I guess, to get over.
Yeah, can I just comment on a little thing? Again, I'm incredibly unsettled that non-smoker agrees with me, but whatever. Other than that, yeah, it happens once in a while, right? So anyhow, basically, guys, this is. Democracy is super duper important to Ukrainian people because it's a novelty, basically, where many people fought for it and many people are super proud, for their voting and want to continue do it. This is one of the reasons we don't want Russia over here, But it's the way you speak is you speak like people who are not in a war zone. I'm very sorry. It might sound a bit offensive to people, but this is the talk of people that never lived under shellings, under bombings. They didn't have mass refugees. They didn't have occupied areas. They didn't have bombs falling on their heads to such capacity, at least. So it's a talk of people who don't understand like the sheer chaos of this war and the concentration it takes for it to fucking function now. So yeah, and not to be like this Slavic person that is mean to Americans, but I kind of am because
It's
this
okay,
is such
you
an
can be
American.
mean.
It's like
Not mean.
very
It's just an opinion, man. It's just a point of
Yeah,
view. That's
yeah, I
completely
understand
fine.
that, but I understand mine. So I mean, to me, when I was listening to a couple of people, it seemed like the eagle will just fly by, any
Anna,
second.
you have to understand, Americans think they can just vote any problem away.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
not this
and
one.
of course, the commie's gonna agree with you, Anna. He doesn't
Of
believe
course
in
the
voting to
Tom
begin
is
with.
gonna agree with you.
I
Well,
mean,
that's
Nah,
not.
it's all right, man. I'm sure if they vote, the war will end.
oh
I
no,
mean,
it's not
I'm
going to
not
end the
a
war.
commie
Then it
person,
doesn't fucking
you
matter.
know.
But if they want to keep up the farce of democracy in Ukraine, they will move
That's
mountains to
fair
vote.
point.
Hey,
That's
Farce
a
of
fair point.
democracy.
Excuse me.
That's a
Come
fair
on.
point.
Excuse me.
We're talking
dude. Like-
about a place that is banned a religion because of its ethnic Russian origins.
That's a fair point, but it
No,
is a
dude,
farce. So it
that's
doesn't
not.
matter.
That's really
That's
okay.
not why
Sparky,
event-
Sparky, can I ask you a question?
Sorry.
Let's say that there was like a preacher, right? A preacher out there in charge of some sect. We won't say which religion, right? Let's say it's a religion, but whatever religion it is. And in that sect, he's head of that sect, and he says, if you go to America and you kill Americans, you will go to heaven. You will go to heaven. You'll be fine. That is the good thing to do if you are a proud member of the religion. That is what the head of the Russian Orthodox Church said on national television. And he said things repeatedly over and over and over and over again on radio shows and in other publications about the need for every good religious person who is a true resident of the church to fight against the Ukraino-Nazis. That it's a fight of not only geopolitical significance, but religious and spiritual significance as the crusade against the transgender 𝕵𝖎, whatever the fuck like insult it's going to be. Satanists is something that's also talked about a lot. A lot of
LGBT
Satanists in Ukraine.
invasions. Yeah.
And so while I might have a different perspective on how religious organizations should be treated, many other countries would do the same exact thing in Ukraine's position if the head of a religious organization was calling for people to go to your country and kill everybody.
Because that during martial law, our churches and our priests who have been under Moscovian Patriarchate, the Moscovian part of the church, have been collaborating with Russians. Intel information was found that they were given intel to Russian, command. They were like basically agitating to support Russia. They
Then
were
give him the
agitating
Coach Red
for-
Pill treatment. That's all you got to do.
Ah,
Do it-
that
yeah,
fucking freak.
yeah, that
I
dumbass.
forgot, sorry.
Just arrest him because
Yeah.
that's what he was
I
arrested
mean,
under, right?
They have been basically, yeah. But then again, you can disagree, obviously, but what you said is not because it's just Russian. That's just simply incorrect. And same thing with the parties. They are not banned because they are. I don't know. Like, if you think Communist Party in Ukraine was communist, I must break hearts right now because it was just straight up Russian, Russian puppet, party. So yeah, that served the Russian interest. It was not communist, not socialist in any fucking shape or form. So yeah, so it's just like I said, most of it's martial law, guys. It's war again. So yeah, basically people who are danger right now to very awful situation we're already in, but people who have danger to us and sabotage Ukrainian war effort will get some shit, which
Put him in the gulags.
yeah,
Let's go.
So
should be.
what would happen? You talked earlier about logistics, right? Like, there's plenty of people that are displaced, but presumably that's a really big problem the Ukrainian government should be focusing on, getting them addresses, getting them settled. Surely, if they can do all that, they can also get them a mail-in ballot. Is it that hard?
Not if you're in occupied territory.
Well, yeah. What happened during the U.S. Civil War to occupied territory? They didn't vote. That's like, you just keep
It's
the
not
people
the
in there from
same.
previous Congress. That's it. Or they don't show up.
Wait. My history on America is not the best. I will admit, but what they occupied by fucking other country that is
The Civil War is an active, essentially a similar sort of thing. There's an active war going on within the country.
That's
were you
not
guys
exactly true,
involved?
but okay.
Yeah.
It didn't have
Were
foreign
they
backing
camp?
because
At all.
Karl Marx kept the UK out, but it could have had foreign backing.
Wait. Were your cities like destroyed, thousand upon thousand of them, like to dust? No.
Well, Georgia,
Well,
kind of,
during
a little
certain
bit.
points, yes. There was several countries
Depends where you
burned to the
were.
fucking ground. Yes, that did happen during the American Civil War, but not during the
Like-
period in which
like
they're referring to.
Mariupol
That was
type
later in
of
the war.
Bakhmut type of damage.
No.
But with artillery.
No, there was it wasn't industrialized like that.
I want
no.
to give Sock some space. Sock, go ahead.
No, so I would totally agree that modern warfare can hit more people further from the front line than 1860s warfare can. Absolutely. But we've seen like the nightclub videos from Ukraine. Plenty of people are 99% of the time living mostly normal lives. They can fill out a mail ballot, right? If people can spend time. Well, yeah, like near the front line, it's scarier, but that's true in all war situations, right? They still have time to like fill out a mail ballot or not if they don't want to. That's their choice. I don't see any reason.
Wait, the ones. First of all, I don't know how it works in the United States, to be quite honest with you. I mean, do you have to be like registered to a certain place to go to vote or not? Is it like tied to address where you live?
Yes,
it is.
Oh, so it's the here. So if you, for example, if you are in, like I was, for example, if you are like in Poltava, for example, not you actually a Kharkiv citizen, your registration, for example, is in Kharkiv, right? But you now live in, I don't know, Ivano-Frankivsk in the West. It's very fucking hard to get that documentation straight, especially during war, because it's fucking chaos.
But if your goal is to be giving people aid in the first place, you should be expediting all of these systems anyway, right? Like if the welfare paychecks are currently being given to people in occupied territory or whatever who've been forced to move west, now they aren't fucking getting it. That's a big problem too. If you can't sort that out, right? Like stuff like that actually is part of the reason why democracy is so important. If the government can't fix shit like that, maybe they're not doing a good job. They should be getting fucking reconsidered by the voters.
I will agree that organizational problems with internally displaced people, I suffered from them myself. It was a fucking hassle to like make like if I didn't need it much, but if you want to get like the money basically by internally displaced person, you have to go do so much stuff with the papers and stuff like that. It was lines for like months for some people. So yeah, it was done in not the best way possible, obviously, and the organizational problems, I will agree, were there, but let me just place it like that. It's not a fucking priority in any shape, way, or form.
There's
I think that is a clear point.
Chance. Oh, sorry. There's probably a decent chance of also Russia just contesting whatever result there is, and probably creating more unrest as well.
Don't care that much about that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck cares what they think? Yeah,
I just want to quickly also state that when we say, because Sparky was saying this, it's just another example of the farcical of democracy in Ukraine. Well, let's be clear. This isn't something that Zelensky's like new decision where he's like deciding, now during wartime, this is what we do. This has been part of the Ukrainian constitution since it was written. So it's not like this is like a new thing that has just been added. So the idea that Ukraine, like democracy is broken down. Here's a question. Was the United Kingdom and how it operated during World War II, was it still a democracy? We should be able to say that it's still a democracy while saying that democracies take different actions protectively during wartime.
I mean, the argument I would give is that the longer you go without the election, the like it is a decline. There is democracy is not a binary; it's a gradient, right? If the UK had spent another 5 years not holding an election, another 5 years,
they spent 10 years.
Yeah, they spent 10 years, right, from the war start to the war end. But if they went for another 5 years, right, they were like, well, all these decolonizing nations, they're another extended crisis, another 5 years, and another 5 years, and another 5 years. At some point, you would be like, hey, we're increasingly moving away from democracy. 10 years is really getting fucking up there, right? That's half of someone's like childhood, of becoming a young adult. That's a lot of time for the government to make huge fuck ups, and for you to be able to say you should be fucking thrown out of office for that. Like, yeah. I do want to agree. It is in the Constitution. It is like a martial law thing that they can't hold elections. So as a centrist, I simply think that Zelensky should undo martial law during voting hours on certain days for like 8 to 6 and then turn it back on, just like a little switch.
Dude, I super apologize. SDL.
I know that's yes.
So but I'm trying to see the names, but basically is I'm not like it's just like I said, it's an incredibly American thing. I understand, but it's also like I still was not answered to me. How will you organize 8 million people abroad voting? How you will address occupied voting, which is impossible, literally. How you will address all those displaced people with a I will admit, shitty organizational things that have been going on this whole time. Yeah, so how will you do any of that? So this, by my, I'm horrible at math, let's put it like that. But it's about 15 million people. So how will you address that? How is what's your suggestion? How do you deal with that?
Oh, I mean, so
on practical level.
these are things that countries already do. The US already has people abroad voting. Like the Soviet Union actually had a system where I think every 100,000 soldiers voted in elections domestically.
Fucking United States to Ukraine that is barely fucking holding on by a
Sure.
fucking
Well,
thread.
you want to know another country that does this is Turkey. All foreign Turkish citizens, like in Germany, for example, there were campaigns in Germany about who to vote for in Turkey.
That's very great, but we don't have this apparatus functional in any way right now.
Yeah, not yet. Like that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
This is stuff that every country that wants to be I think that part of the point of trying to run election is an aspirational goal. It's showing that you can do this, you do value this, and you're building infrastructure to do it forever because you actually do care about the votes, unlike the previous administrations.
Yeah, I agree that it should be done, but it's not like on my priority list. It's like, I don't know, down there somewhere, you know? It's like
well, no. So what we're seeing here, honestly, is a difference between worldviews. Anna, you're Ukrainian. You don't have the same view of what's important for democracies and things like that. I can actually,
awesome.
No, I'm not putting you down. It's just it's a different viewpoint. Americans, we do things like mail-in voting for people
you don't
abroad,
understand freedom.
People that are in.
Yeah, an
no, they don't.
Yeah, Mom. I know.
I don't.
Level.
Okay. And Anna and
I'm looking at a constitution that says they can enslave their people under martial law.
That's not what that's. What are you? What?
Under Article
what do you mean
43.
enslave their people? What do you mean they can enslave their people under martial law?
They're not enslaving anyone right now.
Please tell me the enslavement of their people. I would love to hear this.
Use of forced labor is prohibited. Military or alternative non-military is also work service carried by person in compliance with a verdict court decision in accordance with the laws.
Are you trying to say it as fast as possible so we don't know what it means?
If it is under martial law, forced labor is not considered forced labor. Is what it's saying.
What you just read like
yes, Article 43. I was reading the entire statement to myself.
Okay, could you post it in the group chat, maybe?
Yes.
Instead of just reading it really fast.
Okay, while he's posting that, we got $5 from Temperate Takes to say to put up some defense and give Anna some hope. Not some Americans are not this stupid, and $10 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 Predict It. Holding election during the American Civil War was unprecedented, and it's stupid to suggest that the situations are anywhere near the same.
Yeah. If I could,
yeah.
Again, I want to clarify, like, while, again, the patriot in me wants these things to happen, it's very understandable that for a country that is in the middle of war and doesn't have the resources to do these things, that they wouldn't spend resources that they don't have trying to hold elections, and especially with how many people are outside of the country, and how are you going to track down every single Ukrainian?
Internal displacement is something people don't talk about much, I noticed. So many people talk about refugees who are abroad, but the huge problem is that internally misplaced people, there are even more than refugees who went, to other countries.
Yeah, I mean,
so there's also...
No, I'm just trying to agree. I think you said 8 million. I believe that's the UN's number, right? Like just an enormous number of people.
It is.
But the whole point,
maybe more, actually,
part of the whole point of democracy is to let people give a referendum on whether the government is handling that well. And I think that, honestly, I think the best argument against holding an election is that there might be too much support for Zelensky, that there's too much rally around the flag. People will be irrationally pro-Zelensky. But that's not always the case. Like I gave the example of the US Civil War. People voted in surprisingly high numbers for the Democrats, the anti-Lincoln Party, because of how bad they thought the war was going, and because some of them were really, really racist. And so the reason I'm trying to give this... Sorry, go ahead.
I give up. It's Civil War comparison.
I know it's not identical. But I'm trying to say that the point of this is to express, the point of this is to be able to express dissent or disagreement with Zelensky's policies. Like, has he been doing a good job with internally displaced people? We never hear about this, in part because I think there hasn't been a process to put this at the front of the political agenda. It's always about the war, right? If you have democracy, if you have people debating...
about the war now.
Yes.
I hate to fucking agree with non-smoker again. I'm like losing my hair right now, but it is only about the war. No, shut up! Just don't even mention it. So so basically, the situation is that nobody gives a fuck about anything other than surviving and preserving our nation. Do you understand?
They should. That's the point of having democracy. Is that
that's
it
your
makes
American
it harder.
Opinion.
No, I mean that's part of the reason
Oh,
democracy has
whatever, I
survived and
guess.
like spread all over the world, right? There's a reason democracy
You
has slowly
understand?
won.
Do you understand? Like we're like hanging like a fucking. It's just a miracle that we still exist due to the assistance of the West and our own perseverance and our own will to struggle against Russia. You know, it's just it's not even it's not it's not even on anyone's mind. And I understand that what you mean, that it is pretty important in terms of like preserving democracy and electoral process and things like that. Also, most people think Zelensky does a great job. Just saying, yes, at least a possible job. He's doing way better than anyone expected him to. Let's put it like that. It'd be the best
Yes.
way to express it, I think. But overall, people are pretty cool with the way he represents us internationally. First and foremost, like on an international, sphere, geopolitically, let's put it like that. And also, what his administration is doing inside the country is pretty damn good. So yeah, there are certain fuck ups for sure, but it's to be expected. But overall, it's just a dumb waste of time, and it is barely possible to include, like I said, internally displaced people, refugees. 20% is occupied, nothing to be done there whatsoever. So yeah, so the people are fighting on the front lines. Quite a lot of them, like I said, 1 million people at least, like actively there, not reserved, like actively. So this is just it is in my opinion, again, absurd. But I am like but a lousy Ukrainian. I don't really understand all the
You don't understand
I
freedom.
have never tried to make this thing about like America does it right,
it's a joke.
other
It's
than
a joke.
as some like chest pumping bravado. The argument I'm trying to make is that democracy is so important for determining, like, you say Zelensky is popular, and I think that's probably true. But how can you really know until you tally the votes? How can you really know whether people like his policies on XYZ issue until they get elected? Until you do the real count.
Policy on XYZ.
STL, can I ask you a question?
War
quick?
is the only thing that matters. Oh, sorry.
No, you're STL. So look, do you basically agree? I know you probably said this already, but you basically agree that Zelensky would almost definitely win re-election anyway, right?
Sure, for the presidency,
yes.
but there's a lot of other positions as well.
Hold on. So this is a symbolic thing, basically, is what you're saying.
No, because part of the vote is about what type of war we want, like Ukraine wants to prosecute. So like one question that we haven't really talked about here is how long is the war in Ukraine going to go on? And how is Ukraine going to pursue peace? Is it going to take back every inch of land? Is it going to pursue peace with some sort of negotiated settlement, giving up Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk? Those are the exact kind of things that you need democracy to solve. If you don't do a referendum, you've got to do it through the parliament. And right now, we don't.
I give you an answer right now. Like pretty much 90% by all the polling we have of Ukrainians, and literally every person I know, literally every person I talk with, and I talk with a lot. I'm a volunteer. I like hundreds of people, and everyone is pretty much says in Ukraine that we need to take every bit back. So it's not we are not we are. It's remarkable to see our administration and government represent our interests now, because it never happened before, quite honestly. People were like pretty disillusioned about political shit in Ukraine, which I think they are in many countries, not just Ukraine, to be fair. I think it's like something that people think that their government doesn't represent them is not just a Ukraine problem, let's put it like that. But overall, I think right now pretty much everything is not everything, it's abroad, but like 95% of shit that our government does and says is what people think. So yeah, not all, obviously it's not possible, right? But yeah, so for now, for some kind of like I will repeat myself again. It's just the war thing. It's the most important thing. You cannot actually, we don't have like a apparatus and organizational capability to make people who internally displaced and refugees abroad to vote properly. Honestly, I have no idea how the fuck that could be organized, considering how I'm Ukrainian, I know how shit is fucked here in many aspects. So basically, I have zero idea how do you organize it, and most importantly, why the fuck would you? So yeah, so that's it basically. Sorry, that's not gonna repeat myself again.
I mean, I agree with that. I happen to think there's no way that anybody would be elected president who has a radically different view than Zelensky does. And I think that's why ultimately in pretty much every scenario he'd win re-election. And I think it's purely a symbolic thing. And I think it's not a symbolic thing for Ukrainians. It's a symbolic thing for Western liberals. They want to export our political system there. And this is sort of the deeper inner workings, you know, psychologically
This
of
is psyop?
imperialism. It's like you want we as
That's
this,
true.
you
I
know,
do
Well-
want
great-
more places to be democratic.
Yeah, you do.
My
No,
deep
you want
imperialist
it to be
agenda of
democratic
being
the
able
way
to
that
choose your
America is.
leaders.
You want them
Okay.
to be
Well,
democratic
I
the way
wouldn't say
America
that.
is.
Okay, I have to say I want to say a few things. So the first thing is there's a reason why we had an election in the United States, and part of the reason we had an election in the United States during the Civil War was the idea, and I think it was George McClellan who ran against Lincoln in 1864. It was because they wanted to make sure that whoever was leading the country during wartime was as accountable to the people as possible, because the people think they're leading their young men and women into a bloody, terrible death with no chance of victory. They're mismanaging the war. They either want to get somebody who can manage the war well, or they want to maybe say, actually, we don't like this path at all. Maybe you should make peace with the Confederacy. Lincoln won because he started getting some victories in 1963, and then the rest is history. Confederates lost, get fucked,
1863,
Lamau, right? In this case, we do need to remember that most democracies around the world, in the same situation here, as is true with the United Kingdom, as is true with most democracies, would do the same exact thing in Ukraine's place. I don't think, though, even if we can say that most democracies would do what Ukraine is doing, that necessarily means that this comes from an imperialist mindset. I could think that SDL is coming from a position of, look, it is good institutionally to have this check on power during wartime in case the management starts mismanaging the war. For example, in 2014 and 2015, the Ukrainian government mismanaged its response to the Russian invasion. The military was failing, and then volunteer battalions like Right Sector and other organizations picked up guns and tried to do the job that the military itself couldn't do. So I do think it comes from a good place, even if at the end of the day, I think the election would result in basically the same exact government that is in office right now.
Well, and in short, the argument is it would be the same government because Zelensky's doing a good job. That's the whole point, right? If he was doing a shit job, then democracy would really fucking matter because they would kick him the fuck out. So, like, yeah, that would be democracy
We have other
working.
ways to kick him the fuck out. I'm sorry. Have you
I mean,
forgot to follow
yeah, you could do
routine?
Euromaidan too, but those are extremely rare.
Yeah, not only that, it's not the time. It's not the time now. The war. Like, I would like to say, SDL, I'm sorry if I came out like a bit too strong.
Oh,
but
don't,
tried
dog.
to be,
It's
like,
fine.
Yeah. But just to say, like, I don't agree, obviously, with non-smoker that it is your imperialist ambitions. I think democracy
No,
obviously matters. Yeah, I just don't think it's.
Lockdown
I
left,
already expressed
imperialists.
this opinion several times.
Told you.
Yeah, but that one I don't sign up on. Let's put it like that. I'm
This-
already like shaken that he agreed with me. So yeah.
This is the thing that's
5
difficult though
times.
with SDL is SDL's solution for this though is fucking ridiculous. The idea that he's going to
Yes,
remove
yes.
martial law for like a day or something.
Okay, look.
look.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of
Dylan,
ridiculous.
that
Okay.
was my response to you. Like, there may be a scenario where that's appropriate hypothetically, like you mentioned 2014 in your view, but that's not the scenario now, right? Like, to have an election now is totally meaningless. And it's just a symbolic thing to make Western liberals feel good about supporting Ukraine. It's like, look, they're just like us.
I don't
They
think it's
vote
that
too.
simple. I don't think it's. I think you're not addressing the point that look, institutionally, it makes sense for democracy to say that they need checks on its administration, because if you just give any authority the ability to say, look, we have power until the end of this emergency, that could be abused.
I
And
think
look,
it's at the discretion of each country. It's not like a general rule. And
Well,
in Ukraine,
I'm not saying it's a general rule, but you can't. I'm not
for
saying.
martial law where elections don't take place. So it's not gonna
Okay,
take
but
place.
don't say that it's just
Laws
from
can
an
be
imperial
immoral.
mindset, and it can't be a good reason for somebody to have this position outside of just being an
No,
imperialist.
I'm not saying that there's no example where an election could, hypothetically, but that's not the circumstances of what we're talking about right now.
Well, so like that in my opinion, the strongest argument for no election is quite literally that there would be no change, right? But the argument that Dylan is presenting is the same one that I am.
It's how you do it. You didn't answer it in a single time. You said it would be great if you could do it. You should do it. Your government should do it. He should be able to organize it. But you said should, could, would be great. But how they will like practically do it now?
Okay,
Nobody.
I am
answered it
going to
because
try to. I'm going to
it's
try
not-
to take a stab at this. So I recognize, just real quick, I recognize the logistical issues involved, and that it would be a very hard task to do, and I don't think that you have the infrastructure to do it. But let me steelman it for a bit. Simply because it would be an imperfect election, does that not mean we should have an election, even if it's only local elections, even if it's only for the cities, municipalities, and regions in which aren't under occupation, would it not send a signal, not to the Ukrainian people, but to the Western world who is supporting this budding democracy, who is arming them with material, with bullets, with funding?
Show them you guys
right?
can handle it.
And say, look, if you want to keep our support, we support democracies. We're, history ended. The West ascended. Liberals in control. I mean, again, we can point to problems in that some people would be disenfranchised, absolutely, and these are issues. But why not have the election as a signal anyway?
3 points. First of all, you're making non-smoker incredibly happy, and I don't like it. Second of all, yeah. Second of all, I understand what you mean. Like, we are not dumb-dumbs over here. We know what you guys like and what you guys value. We are trying to value that too. Freedom of speech, democracy, all of that is important to people. I will not pretend it isn't. It is. But at the end of the day, I understand that this would be probably kind of like good to signal to the West to show them, oh, those Ukrainians, they're like, they're cool. You look at them, right? And I understand that it's very important to many people. And I try to be, how to say it? I try to be understanding basically to everything, and I do want my country to look way more like the Western country than it does right now. So don't get me wrong. I obviously do want that, and most people in Ukraine want that. European Union at least, right? And things like that. But at the end of the day, like I said many times, it is first of all incredibly hard. First of all, you say it will not be perfect elections. It would not be perfect. It would be fucking stupid elections because half the country would not be able to participate in them. What the fuck is that? Like, how do you call that a democracy if like half the country cannot fucking vote?
Only half in America, less than half in America sometimes vote. So I mean,
well,
yeah,
well,
but dude,
that's
they
a
have
choice.
the option to.
Let me speak to this, Anna.
Yeah,
so
they can.
you asked about mail-out ballots. Most states in the United States, and I know I'm always referring here, but it's an example. Most states in the U.S. I know, but most states in the U.S. didn't have any mail-in ballots, except for like a very small group of people, like elders and some disabled individuals, until the COVID pandemic. And then, like on a dime, we rolled it out because all you do is you get printing machines. All you do is match it up against the voter registry.
Kill me now. Just kill me. You're great.
You asked for concrete examples. No, I'm saying
you're beautiful. You can do that. We don't do that. We never done it. There's no precedent of it. Nobody done that.
What he said, there was no precedent in America before that either.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Is like we just bought the machines. We printed the ballots. We did it.
Well, one thing I want to say to Wick, because he was talking about like
I'm giving up
demonstrating to the rest of the world about Ukraine being this model democracy because despite the war, they valiantly held an election and there were mail-in ballots. Can you imagine like the perhaps the negative response that might happen if, because there's some major screw up with this mail-in ballot system the first time it's ever implemented during a fucking war, that like could possibly undermine this vision of Ukrainian democracy? People saying, oh, there was voter fraud, Zelensky stuffed the ballot box, blah, 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 all this shit. Like there's no way those are accurate results.
Look, and if they don't hold the election at all, if they don't hold the election at all, what will be said is, oh, look, they're postponing this democracy. They're not real. Like either way, it's going to be propagandized against Ukraine by people who don't like Ukraine. That's just
whatever. Everything is in the way or no.
Okay, I think the gains from it are minimal. Sorry, go on.
Nothing. I wanted to react.
Just take it over. I don't care.
I wanted to react to something that
I made my point.
Just vote. Just
I just
vote.
Yeah.
I just spent the lazy work of actually drilling into Article 43 of the Ukrainian Constitution, also this claim Sparky made earlier. I was going through this. And let me just ask Sparky a question. Do you believe we have slavery in the United States, Sparky?
We do.
Okay, so...
it's actually constitutionally allowed under the 13th Amendment for prisoners, yes. And
okay, so to be clear, so America's also not a democracy.
Oh.
Based.
I just want to hear that from you.
No, America is a constitutional republic.
That's a type of democracy, Sparky.
It is a type of democracy.
So it's a democracy.
But no, I was
but
actually looking through the Ukrainian.
I was looking through slavery. I just want to hear that.
Yes, there is authorized
Okay.
slavery for prisoners.
So how can you use this then if you think America is still a By the way, I disagree with prisoner labor. This is something I disagree with in Ukraine's case. I disagree with
I
America's case.
disagree with it as well.
But if you're going to say that America's a
I was
democracy
just sticking through the
and
claim
Ukraine
about
isn't, and you're using this as proof, that doesn't make much sense because I'm looking through this, and a lot of this is like, for example, you can draft people during war. How many countries have this in our democracies?
Yeah, we have that. But no, what I was doing is I was trying to find where it said that elections can be suspended under martial law. I could not find that, by the way. I was looking through the Ukrainian constitution, and while I was looking for that, I used keywords: vote, election, martial law, things like that. I was looking for it because I'm trying to substantiate the claim. That's all it is. And I just ran across that. I went, oh, ooh. And if it was only for prisoners, I probably would overlook it. But no, it's also military.
You mean like the draft?
Because
that's what it's talking about, like draft, ditch digging. Like these are things that the United States did during the Civil War, and we do not even during the Civil War. We're invading other countries, right?
I was just looking at it, and that just caught my eye. I was like, ooh, that don't look good.
Okay, did you look up, did you like see if there was any examples of like forced labor that you could equate to slavery? Because at the end of this, it also says that everybody has the right to compensation for said work. So if you're getting paid for said work, is that slavery?
Do you consider what's going on in our prison system where we have slaves working for less than minimum wage? I mean,
you know what?
Prisoners working for less than minimum wage? Because
I think morally you can describe that as slavery, but in the way you described it, seemed to keep America from that is like a Ukraine specific thing.
No. See, the are not considered forced labor is what really just grabbed my eye. I was like, oh, so we're just going to deny this forced labor altogether. Fine, fair, whatever.
But no, do you have like any examples?
I was still looking for if you could find me the elections may be suspended in times of war thing, because it doesn't show in the Constitution that I've searched.
It's just when I think of the term slavery, I think of like, like the Libyan slave trade, or I think of like, slavery. And if I hear Americans say that country has slavery, right, I usually aren't thinking they're saying they have slavery, we have slavery, we'll have slavery. That's usually not what they're saying. So I think that's important context. I think that's important. Wait, to be clear, I think that's important context you should have included when you said that Ukraine has slavery, because Americans are going to think like, people are in the fields picking watermelons in Kherson, locked up with like chains around their ankles.
Picking watermelons, that's an interesting one to choose.
Well,
great job, Dylan.
Kherson have they're famous for watermelons.
Do they also pick fried chicken while you're at it? Come on, man.
What?
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, you don't understand.
Kherson is famous for for watermelons.
Yeah, it is the trade. Yeah.
Well, we learned today, gang. We learned it today, in the most hilarious way possible. Okay. Is there any other we're kind of winding down on this one, and we do have one more to get to, and I know it's late. I don't want to keep you.
Can I ask how long it will be? Because it's late as fuck.
Oh, we can. Yeah, if you guys need to go, we can kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, maybe there's like one more something. I don't know. There was another question, right?
Yeah, there's one more question in here, but if it's...
By the way, as Dylan, again, if I went a bit too hard, I'm sorry. Just to me, it seems very ridiculous.
You do not need to apologize. No, like I understand the position. I understand there's a lot of logistical challenges. I just think this is like a really important aspirational goal. Like it's the same reason that just to give you an example of the opposite. In Syria, Assad held sham elections during the civil war. He still got a shit ton of people turned out because it shored up his regime, right? Like one of the reasons you do democracy is partly just to show that the government has support. It's the opposite of the 𝕵𝖎𝖙 thing, right? That's the whole, part of the reason of this is just to show, hey, this is a functioning democracy. We can choose to get rid of our leaders, but we actually really fucking like them.
We will get elections at some point, just not in the middle of the fucking war, okay? Let's move on, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't.
Sorry,
we're not going to agree.
No, we're circling the drain on this one. Okay, gang. Last question of the night. If Russia does begin to deteriorate, and there is a second Prigozhin or Wagner Rebellion, and it does lead to more strife, ongoing strife, at what point, if any, does the NATO, US, etc., have the responsibility or duty to step in and intervene in some way? Do they at any point should they be involved in this? Given that Russia is a nuclear power, is it in our interest to do so? And morally, do we have a responsibility to do so? What do we think? Any thoughts?
I apologize. Can I clarify like the question?
Please.
Do you mean like if Russia starts to like there's like civil full on like
Think the
civil war type of
90s.
shit
Think the
going on?
90s where it's kind of breaking apart, falling apart, only with a lot more violence.
Uh-huh. And like what
Oh,
United States
it
is
does-
supposed to do about that?
So, is it what I'm asking? Is there any point where the U.S. or NATO should directly intervene in that at all?
Like to stop like the civil war and shit like that?
Whatever way you think they should intervene. This is an open question, so whatever you think.
No,
No. So okay.
No,
no.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Honestly, now I just think the U.S. shouldn't be involved in the Ukrainian war right now. But that's just me.
All right.
I mean, like, the thing is, we saw what happened in the 90s. I think the safest bet for everyone definitely would just be to stand from a distance and just watch it unfurl and let the Russians kind of sort out their own affairs. I think that would be the safest bet. If we intervene, for example, there was some speculation like, oh, did Biden possibly help Wagner in this coup and was all CIA orchestrated? From everything I'm seeing, it seems that the Biden administration's take was just let it happen. Don't do anything. Don't say anything in support. Don't say anything against. The Biden administration, from what I read, actually canceled gold sanctions, I think specifically on the Wagner Group or Wagner associated people, specifically because they didn't want to look like they were even taking a side in comparison to what happened. So they literally backed off of actions that they were going to take to make sure that they looked neutral. And I think that's the smartest thing to do. Concentrate on liberating Ukraine. Let the Russians sort out their internal affairs. Now, if there comes to some event where like Rusich takes over a nuclear stockpile and they're like, we're going to end the world to like start 𝕾𝖎𝖙 and like the white race shall come from the or some like weird crazy shit like that. Igor Girkin like a nerve breaks and he takes over a storehouse. Then maybe you could justify some like isolated raid to specifically stop something like that. But we saw this chaos in the 90s play out and the world didn't blow up. And I think foreign interventionism, instead of stopping the world from blowing up in this case, could speed up that process. Because then, there's this idea of like, hey, a red line was crossed at a moment of weakness for the Russian government, where they crossed the red line of Russia's territorial integrity. Let's use a nuke. That has been the longstanding red line for the Russians on nuclear warfare. They've tried to pretend that it's changed at the start of the war. We have no real reason to believe that's the case. So I just think if this was to occur, you let that happen. Now, if other countries and their alliance structure start breaking off, for example, Belarus wants to flip, well, then I think we have a full right as an independent country to make our own relations with Belarus, or to, if their people overthrew that government and they spiraled off in their own way and want to join the EU, it would be fine to do that. But leave the Russians to sort out their own affairs. I think that should be the broad idea.
Based.
Any other thoughts on this? It might be a quick topic if everyone's in agreement.
Yeah, really quick. I mean, look, if you're NATO and the US and let's say that the coup, was still ongoing, why interrupt your enemy while they're making a mistake? You know what I mean? Like let the whole destabilization in Russia benefits the West completely. If anything, maybe scramble to try to work out a deal with Prigozhin, ahead of time for some sort of diplomacy and resolution. Where Ukraine gets all of its territory back. I think that would probably be the smartest thing. To get involved in any way other than that makes no sense.
I could see a scenario. Oh, sorry. I could see a scenario where, let's say, like the Chechens throw out the Kadarites because a lot of their power is tied to Russia, and they're like, okay, we're establishing our own independent republic again. We're sick of being led by this gang, and there could be maybe like sanctions or revolving some another crackdown where they try to do Grozny 2.0 and see how many more children they can bomb to death there. Like there could be a scenario where there could be some interaction from the international community on that issue. But like besides something like that, I agree with Non-Smoker. Why interrupt them when they're making a mistake and give them an enemy to unite around?
Well, if
Let them fall apart.
if Prigozhin looked like he was going to succeed, do you think that we should stop him? Because I don't know what you all think, but Prigozhin in charge is actually going to be worse than Putin. In almost every measure, right? Like that would be a catastrophe, right?
Who knows?
Still no, though.
still no?
Not
even
our
I
in your case?
business.
understand that.
Not our business. Not our
Well,
baby. We
the
shouldn't
reason
mess
I
with it.
asked this question is I asked this question to my Twitter audience, right? I got a few hundred respondents. Most of them said yes. About 60% of them were like, yes, the U.S. should intervene in some point. And so I thought we would have a little more disagreement here. But I guess I was wrong. So, hey, it's what it is.
It just depends on the specifics. Like if it's some
Sure.
if we find out that there's some, for example, like some hardcore crazy Russian nationalist takes over a certain section of Russia and starts doing something that could actually be a threat to global stability, like threatening to nuke people unless we like brought back the USSR or some crazy shit, because there's a lot of crazy people in the Russian government, a lot of crazy factions that have militias and PMCs, a lot of radicals that have been trained up by 8 years, 9 years and fighting the Donbass, fighting in Syria, fighting the CAR, right? Then I could see a scenario to do it. But outside of that, it just feels like entanglement when we can just kind of let the whole apparatus, sort out itself and achieve the goal of liberation of Ukraine.
Yeah, when this
Yeah,
I mean, just one
started,
thing.
As I was
Oh,
saying
sorry.
earlier, like to Wick, I don't really know the answer to this question. It seems like, and it really depends on the surrounding factors when it comes to what's like exactly happening. If there's all this civil war and civil strife happening, but in most cases, it seems like generally you want to stay away from it, with the exception of, uh, dangerous situations.
just
So yeah.
Yeah, just one thing. I just said no, and that's about it. But to elaborate a little bit, I would say that depends on the situation, obviously, in some sort of way. So, if, for example, if this as a result of civil war, let's say some power comes to, I don't know, some fraction comes to power, and they basically attack another country, and I don't know, do genocides, like threaten nuclear weapons to everyone, or like actually strike someone. For example, a NATO-allied country, right? Then of course there's like this certain scenarios you can imagine. But if it is kind of like within Russia itself, then I don't see like the boots on the ground. I don't see like how it's even a thing. Like maybe like
Well-
some political action, sanctions, whatever the fuck. But actual like boots on the ground, not really. I don't see like why that would be the need. Also, I would love them to pull up. So I'm kind of biased.
Stockton left. Any thoughts on this? And if we're all in agreement here, we'll just kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I figured we could just wrap it up.
Okay, fair enough. We'll wrap it up.
Yep.
Gang, it's been a pleasure. It's been fun. Thank you for attending. The long and short of it is, at the end of the day, this is still, there has been a resolution, but is it the final resolution? None of us know. None of us know for certain what the fallout will be in the next month, 2 months to a year. We don't know how this will shape out. It is something to pay attention to, and it just shows the instability, I think, of the region, and that it nothing is inevitable, right? Putin's regime. If you would ask me if something like this would have happened even 2 weeks ago, that there would be such an open challenge to the MOD by the Wagner group, I would have laughed in your face. Nah, that's crazy. But time makes fools of us all. I want to give each and every one of these individuals an outro so you can know where to follow them, where to find them, and then we'll just kind of wrap it up. We'll start with Sparky. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Aircraft Sparky. You can find me on Twitter at Aircraft Sparky1, on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble. Yeah, all at Aircraft Sparky. Thank you.
Thanks for attending the panel, and we'll have you on again sometime. Dylan, please.
Instead of shouting myself out, can I just read a copy pasta?
Please.
Okay. It's day 487 of the 3-day special operation to denazify Mexico. Mexico has launched a counteroffensive against U.S.-held Tijuana and is suffering 500 to 1,000 casualties a day. Joe Biden and Mark Milley tried to dissolve the McDonald's PMC, which has been oversized and bloated with penal troops from prison across the United States. They threatened the McDonald's CEO with treason and death if he does not comply. The McDonald's CEO takes his entire PMC and takes over Austin, Texas and Atlanta, Georgia without resistance on the way to Mark Milley's office. Joe Biden appears on TV, visibly shaken. Come on, man. Don't fight, man. That's wrong. 7 Apache helicopters shot down in the chaos and a command aircraft is lost. Justin Trudeau mediates a deal with the McDonald's PMC to let them leave to Canada in exchange for not killing Mark Milley. McDonald's take the deal. Poll posters from India and Pakistan applaud Joe Biden's tactical wit and cunning in handling the situation. Another flawless win for the United States. Thank you. Dylan Birds TV, Dylan Birds live everywhere.
Check them out, gang. Non-smoker.
Yeah, twitch.tv/nonsmoker, second O's a 0. Yeah, willing to talk to anyone about this if they'd like further, audience or other panelists or whatever. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Talk on left.
Hey, I'm 𝕵𝖎𝖙. I am a socialist and a big believer in democracy. Sorry for all of those who have not been blessed by the light of democracy yet. I stream, attempting to stream on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can find me at 𝕵𝖎𝖙left.org or 𝕵𝖎𝖙left at Twitter and YouTube.
Hey, thank you for being here. Check them out, gang. Stardust, please.
Hi, I'm Stardust. Thanks for having me in this panel. It was super fun. I cover a little bit of politics, a little bit of online stuff, a little bit of weird interpersonal stuff on my stream. I'm live almost every day. So you should come check me out, twitch.tv/Stardust, youtube.com/Stardust streams, or wherever, really. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your contributions. Anna, please.
Well, hello. I'm Ukrainian Anna on Twitter. That's the only place, you can find me. You can donate there if you want to my PayPal to help me out with my volunteer work, which is assisting Ukrainian armed forces, which at the end of the day is the only thing. Russian circus and shit show is one thing, war is another. So yeah, so please do help me out in Ukrainian armed forces if you can. Also support 𝕵𝖎𝖙 because he is doing quite an amazing job, at showcasing Ukrainian voices and actually weirdly understands us for an American person. So yeah, applause for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also he's doing literally risking his ass. Recently in Kherson, nearly got his ass shot. By the way, so yeah, he's very much deserves your support. So I would just urge anyone to do it. Yeah, and nice to meet you, like everyone who I didn't meet previously. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming, gang. Go to her Twitter and donate if you have some money.
Thank you.
What we got coming up tomorrow's open call-ins, gang. So, well, first of all, if you like the show, right, hit that like button on YouTube. Hit that follow button if you're on Twitch or Kick. Subscribe to my channel. Throw some bits, throw some subs. All the money you give me goes to funding all my hobbies and all the things that I like and enjoy. So please, I could really use your support because I like to enjoy things. What we got coming up? Tomorrow is open call-ins, so if you have a problem with me or anything I've said, you can call in and talk to me about it directly, 6 p.m. Eastern. Wednesday, I'll be talking to Eucharist about some of my religious background in my former religion. And he's going to be interviewing me there, so check us out. And then Friday, we'll have something. Not sure what yet, but I'm sure we'll get something going. For now, though, we're going to rate out. Are any of you fine people streaming right now?
Dylan is.
Okay, we rated.
Oh, yeah, Dylan is, yeah.
Okay,
He has
fantastic.
enough viewers, just saying.
All
I hear is jealousy.
I never have enough.
charity.
I never have enough viewers.
Hey, how do you spell your?
Dylan's putting out good content right now.
How do you
man.
spell
Second
your?
O's a 0, bro. That's
How do you spell your channel's name again? So I don't. Write it
It's
down.
CIA.
Gotcha.
Sorry. Other one. 𝕵𝖎𝖙 BORNS TV.
TV. Okay, that's the important part.
Okay. Well, you all have a good one.
Okay, yeah, I'll see.
Try not to do any coups while I'm not there. Okay, I want to cover it.
Gang, remember to spam those emotes when you get there if you got them, and let them know this is a hate raid. So, see you guys later. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you all again.
Yeah. Bye.